welcome to Happy Times and Places, a positively inclined Doctor Who episode commentary with me, Toby Hadoke.
Thank you, Toby, in the studio. Always wanted to do that. Hello, I'm Darrell MacLaine. I'm a voice actor, impressionist, composer, and clown stroke daft bugger. You might remember me at the start of lockdown. I did this. I'll stick a pony in my pocket. And that was me. And I'm wearing the same jumper I wore in that video, which is a big clue to what I'll be talking about today. I would love to say that was all planned and deliberate, but it's just coincidence, really. Toby Hadoke is not my personal puppet master. However, I'm here today to talk about my favourite Doctor Who story. And when I tell you what my favourite Doctor Who story is, you will say, really? Is there something wrong with him? And I will say, yes and yes, because my favourite Doctor Who story is The Chase from 1965. Really? The Chase, really?
Well, hello, or good morning, should I say, for the first time in one of these. I normally wait till everybody's gone to bed and record late into the night. And I woke up this morning and I was sort of wasting time flicking through social media, getting depressed at the state of the world. And I thought, why am I doing this? I could be watching Doctor Who. So I don't think I'm going to be able to do the whole thing because this house will become a hive of activity soon. But I thought I'd begin with this story because it's a six-parter, so we've got a lot to get through. I hope you've got it lined up and are ready to press play in 3, 2, 1, now. Now, I'm fascinated by this for a number of reasons. Hello, thanks for joining me. Darrell MacLaine is somebody I have never met. He's somebody whose work I've very much admired on Twitter. We followed each other, and I sort of, I was going to say reached out, but that's a very modern and slightly Americanized phrase that I think would stick in my throat were I to say it without doing it as I have just then, invoking it. But I sent him a message, and he has sent me lots of very big files, obviously, which I've only seen the beginning of, and he seems to have joined in with gusto. Now, this, of course, is at the end of the Space Museum. And of course, I remember seeing in the credits of the Space Museum, you know, Dalek and Dalek voice. And I thought, oh, well, that must just be the Dalek that the Doctor hides in the Space Museum. But of course, it's not. It's the lead into the funky jazz sitch that is The Chase. It's a funny score. I think I have to do full disclosure. I haven't seen this story for years, and for many years I had great joy in being, well, not joy, in being furious with it. I think because I'd expected, it was the Hartnell Dalek story that I wanted to see because we didn't have Dalek Master Plan, Doctor and the Daleks and, or the Dead Planet, or, you know, the first one, and Dalek Invasion of Earth, we had approximations of in the Cushing movies. But this seemed very serious as well. You know, it was like an epic chase. God, I love Maureen O'Brien. Oh, I have, and I haven't had to move this cushion. Viewers, listeners to the podcast, you can't see. I'm actually leaning on a cushion that has Ian's Monsters from Outer Space book design cover on it, and I haven't had to move that especially to put it into shot. It was here this morning, and I've just straightened it out slightly so that you can see it. But I haven't put it here especially. It's actually the life I lead, and I think because when I first saw The Chase, it wasn't the sort of serious space epic I was hoping for, because I expected Doctor Who to be very serious, because I wanted Doctor, even though I'd always had fun watching Doctor Who. I grew up with Tom Baker. As I discovered Doctor Who as a youth, it was important for me to be that it be terribly serious. That's as wrong-headed, I think, as other people who grew up with it with retro, who like it because it's a bit naff. I've never quite been able to side with those people because I don't know, because Doctor Who was always terribly serious, and I'm not sure I can get on board with the sort of arch distant. Oh, it's marvelous because it's terrible. I wasn't born. I said it in my show. I'll say it in my Doctor Who scarf. I wasn't born postmodern. I like Doctor Who because it was good. I love Ian's jacket here, and I remember seeing that in a few photos. It's a jacket. It's a shirt, isn't it? It's a stripy shirt. But I remember that being in some of the photos in some of the Peter Haining books. I think there's a rare photo in one that's of a sort of staged. I think Ian's lying down and various other people, including an Aridian, are crowded round him. Some of the black and white publicity stills for this era make the shows look amazing. But so when I got Doctor Who videos, the fact that this had the audacity of trying to be funny, which it does. I mean, that whole sequence with Vicky being redundant is sort of fairly lame comedy, but Maureen O'Brien does it very well, and it's to sort of show that the time travelers are. Well, no, I don't think it's designed for that. I think it's designed to, have a bit of fun at the beginning of the episode, but it does show the lovely sort of dynamic between this quartet, which I think is one of the great appeals of the era, and this is of course Ian and Barbara's last hurrah. And I don't know about you, but I'm not ready to go to London 1965 quite yet. And this is pure padding, but in a sense, although it does give us the driver for the story when they see the Daleks in a bit, but actually I think as a kid, the idea that they would see Gettysburg and they would see the business, actually I think that's quite thrilling, even though it's got nothing to do with the story. The idea that you could sort of touch history is quite a beguiling one. Beguiling alert. And Robert Marsden, who plays Abraham Lincoln, I remember thinking of him as, because I'd never seen him in anything else, never seen his name written down, and thinking, oh, he's just one of those actors that sort of came and went, and there'd never be any chance of finding him or writing to him, and I never did. But I discovered when he died that yes, he was actually an actor that was around for a while, but he was Abraham Lincoln guy. This wasn't just casting somebody you've worked with before because you go, oh yes, Robert does a good American accent or whatever. He did Abraham Lincoln on other occasions. If he didn't do a one-man show, he played. No, I think he might have done. But it was this. So this is the equivalent of Simon Callow as Dickens, or if you were to do one about Field Marshal Montgomery getting the guy from I Was Monty's Double. This was actually we got a beeline to the Abraham Lincoln guy, which. So, and anything you have as an actor that makes you castable, one wonders if we need somebody to play a lawyer. Should we get Robert Marsden? No, he just does Abraham Lincoln. So it's a curse as well as a blessing. But I was pleased that, when Doctor Who had Abraham Lincoln, they had Abraham Lincoln guy. I love the dynamic between these people. I like all of the people in the TARDIS at this point. And gosh, gone is the dynamic of the early years when Jacqueline Hill bashes the thing, and then William Hartnell does too. Oh, it's Queen Elizabeth I. Oh, and of course Shakespeare and Bacon. So again, I think if you're a kid learning history, this is this is amazing stuff. And Roger Hammond and Hugh Walters, and I didn't realize when I first watched this that these are two great thespians. Hammond looking svelte here, who was better known as a sort of rotund character actor who appeared in all sorts of things, and I think a Legal in General actor and lots of Merchant Ivory type stuff, playing slightly plump Men of the Cloth. A great character actor, apparently a very, very lovely man. Lived in the same village as Wanda Ventham and Donald Pickering. That's my fact about Roger Hammond. And he's Dr. Runciman in Mordred Undead. So two very small parts in Doctor Who that aren't reflected, don't reflect actually the sort of size of his career subsequently, where he, there's a lot of one-scene actors in the 1960s we never hear from again, but his career in film and television was fantastic. And of course Shakespeare is Hugh Walters, Runcible the Fatuous, and Vogel in Revelation of the Daleks. A wonderfully light, slightly effete character actor who, with a lovely gag that Shakespeare didn't come up with, the idea of Hamlet. That's rather a nice, neat gag, and it's full of terrific actors. And I love Hugh Walters. I never had the pleasure of either Hammond or Walters, and I would have loved to have done. I think Ian McKellen wrote Roger Hammond's obit in the Independent, and said when he last saw him in hospital, Roger Hammond was sort of saying, "Oh, it's sad that I'm going to die, because it's been such fun." And you go, "Oh, I love that attitude." And I think you could probably do that as an actor in those days. You could just spend your life having such fun, because work was plentiful. Never come across Richard Coe, the presenter. That's all he does in this. But because of course the big news is the Beatles are in Doctor Who, and I sort of I remember when the BSB, the 54 Who weekend, and they did a thing of these are the famous people that have been in Doctor Who, and the Beatles, and I was sort of went, "No, you sort of cheated here," because it's just film of them in something else. Ian's funky dancing, that might be the best thing from episode 1. Yeah, I'm a bit of a dad dancer as well, and you know what? When you're a dad dancer, it feels good, and that's all that matters. It does no one any harm, bar perhaps your children in a public place, but I'm a dad dancer, and I bloody love it. So there, and I could tell you that because you're in my house and I'm wearing a dressing gown. I don't think we have any secrets. The Beatles played classical music. That's a lovely gag. Get with it. I love Ian Chesterton, I love Barbara Wright, and I love Vicky. We're very lucky to have such game, joyous actors in these parts. I mean, that whole thing was frippery, but I was actually rather charmed by it, where once I would have been furious. That's a great shot of the TARDIS on film in it. And this is clever from Richard Martin, this shot of the Doctor over the TARDIS console, because the TARDIS console is not there. In order to maintain maximum studio size, the TARDIS, we've just got the doors. Very clever from Richard Martin, with whom I have a tricky relationship. Again, I remember, forgive me, I'm just being honest when I talk about how angry I was as a young man. And I mean, I wasn't a delinquent. I didn't pull the wings off flies. My anger was purely internalized. I think, it manifested itself perhaps in psoriasis, but that's a more complicated story. But my love for Doctor Who was always couched in a worry that other people wouldn't take it seriously, and other people wouldn't like it, and that it would be axed, or that it would never come back, depending on when and where we were. But I wanted approval, and so it meant it was more important to me that therefore that everybody would love Doctor Who, and so if Doctor Who was ever silly or looked naff, it made me furious. Whereas I sort of wish I'd just sort of dived in and enjoyed it. Although I think I did. My fury was part of my appreciation of it. I did, because it didn't mean I didn't watch Doctor Who every day and rewatch stories I thought that made me cross. This stuff on location amused me. This because Ian and Vicky are not played by William Russell and Maureen O'Brien. In fact, Vicky is played by Barbara Joss, who plays Nemone, the the Optera who stops up the wall in the Web Planet. And it amuses me because on the DVD commentary for this, Maureen O'Brien, I think on her first DVD commentary, when it gets to that bit, goes, "Do you know what? This is the only bit of Doctor Who I remember doing." It's like, well, that's not you, and you didn't do it. So it just goes to show that sometimes a moderator is very important, although Peter Purvis moderated that, but he wasn't to know that. That she'd say, she'd remember a bit she didn't actually do. And it does sometimes make me question my whole life's work. Why are you asking people who don't remember things? I don't care. I've been very lucky to do it. So I'm hoping this watch of the chase will teach me to chill out a bit about Doctor Who when it doesn't live up to my childhood imaginings. But Richard Martin, as I say, I had quite a complex relationship with, because he was always talked of as this sort of film director in sort of writings about Doctor Who. That's good, a tentacle. But his studio work is very ambitious, and I would say it doesn't always come off. But he had the audacity to do interviews quite early on where he sort of went, Doctor Who wasn't ambitious enough, and it wasn't very good, and sort of basically I was too good for it, and Verity Lambert was wrong. And again, a bit like Maureen O'Brien, where she would in Doctor Who magazine do interviews going, "I'm only doing this to plug my book." It seemed like both of them didn't like it and were being disparaging. But then actually, when you have, as I have the pleasure to meet both of them, actually their tone of voice is much more joyous, much more sparky, and in the case of Richard Martin, he's a bit of a mischief maker and an absolute charmer. I love Richard Martin. He's one of my favourite Doctor Who people, even though I spent my childhood being cross with him in his direction. Partially because I was informed by those interviews where, unless everybody said Doctor Who was marvellous and it's so sad you can't see the episodes, I would be like, hang on. Oh, that's very dramatic. And that's a great wheeze. They've got the scene, the screen to look back at great events from the past, and it's actually shown the Daleks are about to chase Doctor Who and his chums. And I like the different coloured Dalek. I think the Daleks look great in black and white. TARDIS. I'm never quite sure about. He does try and mix things up a bit, Richard Martin, sometimes, but I have to say I'm not sure it always. That's a great shot, though. I love that. I think these Daleks look magnificent. There's nothing clunky about the Daleks at all. I can see why they bewitched a generation or two of children. I always find the David Graham voice is unusual. It's not how I imagine the Daleks now, and in fact they've sort of phased out the deeper voice. But they're both great, aren't they? David Graham and Peter Hawkins, again, premier voice people, lending the tones to the icons of our youth, and that's a very clever design. That sort of double door system that the Daleks go through into their. I think it's called a DARDIS, isn't it? Of course, the Daleks' time machine is called a DARDIS. And that's a neat trick, isn't it? Where it's the same three Daleks going round and round and round. That's an inventive use of resources. There we go. Well done. Door doesn't. Yeah, it's a funny old design. That it's sort of slightly curious, but it works. I like it. So this will hopefully, teach me to love something that's doing what it intended to do. It's not that it's sort of slightly silly by accident. It's slightly silly on purpose. A sort of curious hybrid of because people will die as the episodes go on. But also it's got sort of comedy larks about it. That's very bold, isn't it? Because they're both face on, those two doubles. But it's an acknowledgement that the film is never going to be good enough quality that you're going to make out their faces. Sort of unthinkable today. Although that said, I seem to recall there's a double for Harry Lloyd in Long Shot and some of the outside sequences in Family of Blood, where he's face on, but it's far enough away that you can't make him out. So actually, it is thinkable today. We still have to overcome the same problems. The sound effects are the hero of so much of 60s Doctor Who. Just this unearthly, ethereal wind here. I think Brian Hodgson, although we all know his name, and we all Doctor Who fans, I think, are comforted by his name, I think he's an undersung hero of 60s Doctor Who. I think the weird, unsettling, alien soundtrack. Doctor Who's never so alien as it is in is in the 1960s, where there's alien worlds aren't just sort of brave new worlds. They're strange, they're odd, they're unsettling, they're alien, rather than people in hats or slightly skew-whiff versions of planet Earth. And I never quite got this story of the it's just suddenly gone dark. Night has fallen in the studio, but I never quite got what this story was here for. So I'm sorry if I'm being thick. Well, apart from the fact that she's setting up the fact that they shouldn't pull the ring. Okay, that's what it's there for. It just seemed to me to spend an awfully long time doing it. But it is almost like they're going, well, we sort of want a Dalek-based cliffhanger, so we've got to do a lot of hanging around. Ian. She's always working, Maureen O'Brien, and she's so delightful. She's so charming. She's such a charming actress. And he's don't you want Ian Chesterton to be your school teacher? And of course you'd sort of laugh nervously. That's really and it's sort of mixture of sci-fi and fairy tale, isn't it? You could see the tarp going there. But I always wanted to see the chase. I remember the approach to the TV50, where celebrations, where we were shown an awful lot of Doctor Who clips on the night, and that was amazing. God, and they didn't stop coming. There was, for some programs, it was just a clip here or there. The Doctor Who compilation was fantastic. I was at a friend's house, and it was so exciting to see all those clips. But there was talk that they might have repeated a whole Doctor Who story, which frankly was what we deserved. It seems quite strange now that they didn't. But the talk was that the Dalek invasion of Earth was in too bad a state to ever be repeated. I don't know quite where that came from. I mean, there are film prints that are a bit knackered, but I don't think Dalek invasion of Earth was one that had ever particularly been officially marked as that or anything. But that was the story in Doctor Who magazine. The Dalek invasion of Earth was in too much of a mess. Oh, it's going to be a tentacle. That's proper Perils stuff, isn't it? I thought the tentacle was going to come through the hatch. No, we've just got a close-up. Oh, okay. Oh, it's shutting. It's shutting the hatch. Or it's wafting about while the hatch shuts after a bit. Yeah, he is ambitious, Richard Martin, but it doesn't always work. Oh, that's right. The sandstorm's pretty good. But that was quite laboured, wasn't it? The old tentacle, and then the slow shut of the glass panel, and then a sort of high-angled shot of a bit of a monster. Yeah, and they were going to show The Chase as part of TV 50, and it never happened. And I remember getting so excited about that because The Chase was the one. It sounded so exciting. It's the Daleks versus the Mechanoids. Didn't realise it was the Daleks versus the Mechazoids from the end of Part 5. But again, the episodic stuff seemed really exciting because... And you can see why Terry Nation does it, because comic strip peril is is sort of quite fast paced and can change from week to week or take you from landscape or scenario to landscape and scenario. I think it's a big ask for Doctor Who in the 1960s, where if you have the same sets for 6 weeks, you're going to pull it off much better than having to recreate new ones every week. But they do it, and you can't fault the ambition. And well done, William Hartnell and Jacqueline Hill, for being game enough to get absolutely covered in sand. And if you've had a Dalek rise out of the water memorably at the end of an episode, why not have one rise out of the sand, which is a great image, at the end of the next the next time you do it? And that looks great. Although they did try and pull a Dalek out of the sand on location, and of course it didn't work because sand is really heavy. But there's a great picture of them trying to do that, and it's abandoned. So, what a great image, the Dalek rising out of the sand. Let's have him coughing, because Daleks would cough, because sand makes you cough. Yeah, I think it might undermine the dramatic effect that you're going for. It does make sense, but it is silly. But I think I have to accept Dennis Spooner's name is on the credits. He was a very funny man, a funny comedy writer. Terry Nation's background is in comedy. I can't really being disparaging of comedy, seeing as what I do for a living, quiet at the back. Yeah, that was jolly, wasn't it? That was jolly enough. And it passed the time very quickly and amiably. I think my favourite thing has to be the dynamic between the TARDIS crew. I can't remember if I've chosen that in a Hartnell story before. Funny enough, I've only done Hartnell-wise. I've done The Rescue, which is the story where Vicky and Barbara meet. Ian and Barbara meet Vicky, and now I'm doing the one where they say goodbye to her, and indeed the Doctor. And I may have chosen the dynamic between the TARDIS crew there, but I think I'm allowed it because Vicky is part of that mix now as well. And I just think if you're going to do a first episode that has a sort of comedy, it's basically a few comedy interludes and a few fun looks into history, but really aren't much to do with the story. If you're going to have that, you have to rely on the dynamic of and the regulars don't interact with any other characters. You have to rely on the dynamic of the 4 people that you've got, and they clearly get on. They're clearly working very hard to make it work. There's little touches that all of the actors do that keep it alive. So I am going and also, it's their last story. But I'm going for the dynamic between that peerless, faultless TARDIS quartet. Now I'm intrigued to see what Darrell has done, because he sent me 3 very big files that, of course, I am not allowed to look at until the choice. So I have chosen. I'm going to write this down because this is a 6-parter, and I will forget. I had a book here. Oh, I'll write it down in the break. But I'm choosing the TARDIS quartet. What's Darrell?
So the first reason I love The Chase, and let's get this out of the way right at the beginning, is its acorn antiqueness. The fact is, loads of things in the production of this story go really badly wrong, and they make it all the way to screen, and they've been left that way for 55 years. And this is brilliant. Well, I know we're supposed to say that, oh, Doctor Who, really, the things about wobbly sets and rubber monsters, actually, that's a bit of an exaggeration. Actually, it was very, very well made for its time, and it was. But the chase, on the whole, isn't, and that's kind of quite amusing. And I'm sorry if I'm upsetting anyone, but it's actually okay to sit down at Doctor Who and kind of laugh at it as well as with it, and love it, and also kind of take the mick. I've introduced friends to Doctor Who through the chase by saying, let's get this out of the way first. You'll laugh at it, and once you've got through that barrier, you can enjoy anything then on its own terms. And it's worked. It's hilarious. You can actually sit down with friends. Well, not at the moment, but when we can, we'll all sit down together and watch the chase. There are some amazing fluff lines. There's that day for night shot of the Daleks. There's that clock which goes over the screen. There's the Dalek you can see in the corner, which you shouldn't be able to do. There's people making wrong entrances. There are loads of things which are rubbish, but I love them for that. The other thing I will say is, as well as being funny in its own right, and what is Doctor Who for than to enjoy? It's an entertainment programme that's entertaining. It's also probably the most instructive piece of Doctor Who about how it was made, because so many things go wrong. There is no documentary or book that's as insightful into how Doctor Who was made in the 60s as The Chase, because of all the mistakes. You just see it happen on the studio floor. It's like being a fly on the wall. So reason number one, it's acorn antiqueness.
And you know what? If you were to sit me down and put that theory, certainly in the past I would have refuted it, and I would have been furious with you. And I think it's very instructive, especially in this age of sort of Twitter polarization, where the idea that somebody might enjoy the program in a different way from you is tantamount to them being tyrants. I am utterly convinced by Darrell's argument. It does no harm to my enjoyment and the seriousness with which I take Doctor Who. And as I say, I'm not somebody that would normally sort of watch it once removed and sort of with sort of lofty disdain. But that's a great coping mechanism for the chase's faults. I would have enjoyed the chase much more as a kid if I'd loosened up. I'd have enjoyed quite a lot more of my childhood if I'd loosened up. So there's a lesson there, isn't there? Is that Doctor Who isn't always what you want it to be, but it's Doctor Who. Go with it. And if that means sometimes just acknowledging the fact that try as it might, and Richard Martin definitely tried, he wasn't phoning it in. So all of the things that go wrong are because his ambitions were elsewhere. He wouldn't mind a technical fault if it meant that he could get an ambitious shot or pull off an ambitious sequence. And that's a way of approaching making telly. You wouldn't be allowed to now, but the 60s gave you that latitude where technical faults kind of happened and the audience were kind of used to them, and you forgive or you don't. And I'm much more forgiving today than perhaps I was in the past, and I'm better for it. But I still think the coughing Daleks are really stupid idea. I mean, am I not entertained? Let's see what happens in the sands of Aridians in episode 2. But I'm having a jolly morning, thanks to Darrell, who's a game contributor, and that's nice as well, isn't it? That I'm very pleasantly surprised by how people, some I know, some I don't, have reacted to this challenge, and we're about to get sent into total lockdown again, and we need this sort of thing. I need this sort of thing. I'm hoping in throwing it out there to you, it's as helpful to you as it is for me. If not, just get furious with me. But I guarantee you, in 20 years' time, you'll look back and go, no, if I'd loosened up a bit, I'd have enjoyed Toby Hadoke a little bit more. And so, hello, people 20 years in the future. I know, finally you appreciate me. Well, good morning. I have been set the task of watching The Chase by a man I've never met, but who has entertained me, and who has decided that it would be a wheeze for me to find the best things I possibly can about a Doctor Who story that is perhaps not the most well loved, and certainly wasn't in the early days of Hadoke Towers. But very much enjoyed episode 1. Let's see how we do with episode 2. I want you to press play in 3, 2, 1. Now. It's so atmospheric, this opening title sequence. I mean, I'm probably be saying this a lot during this podcast, but I may as well say something. Never before nor since has anyone been so successfully transported through time and space in such an abstract fashion, with a beautifully rendered technique that was happened upon, by a BBC technician whiling his time away between recording sessions. Norman Taylor, I salute you, sir. I think because it's an extended music sequence, I think I had a compilation tape of a Doctor Who cassette that I'd done of music. That's a walking Dalek. Oh no, you see, I'm not. But that's a great shot. You see, that's a great shot and it's a leap from film to studio, of which we'll have an example later that somebody recently referred to on Twitter as controversial. I will weigh in with my opinion. It might be different from yours. That's fine. I always like it when the Dalek gets a different appendage. The sucker. I never have a problem with the sucker. It was an expedient and thing that worked. But I like it, and I like that sort of compassy type device. Oh yes, the Aridians, who I remember were in a lot of the early publicity. The sort of pictures that I saw before I saw the story. The Maya Beast. Ian and Vicky are doing their comedy routine whilst being threatened by tentacled monsters, which I'm not altogether sure about. That's a cracking shot, and that Dalek is moving very well on the sand, which will have, I'm sure, been really, really hard. Dalek action is what we want. Having had an episode, look at that thing, and that's quite a simple technique, but it's a really smart looking device, and I get what it is trying to be, and it fits with the Dalek. Now this is Brian Proudfoot, who in the paperwork is credited as Walk On Aridian. He sort of walk on and die. He is forever famous in my house, and should be in yours, as the first person to play Doctor Who that wasn't William Hartnell, I think, because he is the guy that walks down the poplar trees in the Reign of Terror when William Hartnell couldn't go on location, and they needed somebody to do it instead. And also, prior to this, he's had a really good on-screen role in Doctor Who as Tigellinus, the cupbearer who is poisoned by Nero and has Doctor Who's first and perhaps only, no, there's a couple, but a rare comedy death in Doctor Who, which again, serious me would reject, but it's so well done and it's so very funny. So Brian Proudfoot, who I've never found, I think is dead. I think spent some time in South Africa. I've never 100% been able to narrow it down. Whereas this is a very lachrymose Hewell Bennett making an early career. I remember this clip being on a TV show called Teleaddicts that you used to tune into to hope for lots of fun celebratory insights into old television, but actually, my computer's just fallen on me. That's the ghost of Noel Edmonds, who isn't actually dead, throwing things at me. I used to get, again, I was so serious, I used to get so offended on behalf of the program makers who made brilliant old telly, whose out of context clips were mocked by Noel Eddims. But Telly Addicts was a good source of old clips, and they showed this as a, whose early break was it? And I think the person answered, William Hartnell, and Noel Edmonds was like, well, no, it is William Hartnell, but that's not who we're asking about, because he played Doctor Who. It was Hewell Bennett. So Hewell Bennett did well enough to be well known enough to be an answer in a question about sort of before they were famous. They're trying to do alien body acting, which is laudable, and they're both good actors. Ian Thompson, who plays the other one, who's is a fine actor, still around, still represented by a very good agent, which means that I've never been able to penetrate to his inner sanctum, but also played the Optera Hetra in the Web Planet. This guy, Al Raymond, the third Aridian, I've never found. So if your next door neighbour is going, I was in Doctor Who once, I played a talking fish who blew up a planet, that's a good shot. That the explosion is very well suggested there, with a mixture of, I presume, stock footage, a clever film shot, and then a cut to studio. That was actually quite well done. If your neighbour says, yeah, I was an arsonist fish person in a Doctor Who, it was all live, Don't write in, I know it wasn't live, but a lot of people who were in it at the time tell me it was. I'd forgotten she treads on a dead Maya beast. Gosh. Ian Thompson, Family at War, he did, which was a great show, and he's very, very good in it. Richard Martin saddled him with the Optera costume and then the Aridian leotard. Oh, Hewell Bennett's doing some sort of digging acting there. I don't know quite. Sort of slightly moving the sand, but he's doing something. Hewell Bennett was a fine actor with a gorgeous voice, who and a beautiful face. He was a very handsome young man who then turned up in EastEnders many years later, having obviously enjoyed himself in the pub quite often, and those sort of beautiful young features had sort of turned into puffy, baggy character. But of course, because he had the voice, he had a fantastic voice. He probably, and I did hear the story. He sent signed photos to a friend of mine, so obviously wasn't totally dismissive of the whole Doctor Who thing and the whole being approached thing. But I did hear tell that people who encountered him at his local pub or whatever, he'd be outside. He was quite a committed man of the cups, shall we say? And I say that as I'm not making light of that. I say that as somebody who has been in that boat, and you never quite get out of that boat. But I'm currently docked. I'm currently moored. What are they eating? They're eating some sort of lump of something. I like it when they have a funny pen or a funny breakfast or something that's sort of space pen or space breakfast. It always shows a bit of effort. These are interesting sets, these catacombs. But of Hewell Bennett sort of sitting outside, drinking, and if anyone ever went up to him and said, "Excuse me, are you Hewell Bennett?" You go, "Go away." He wouldn't. It would be a word beginning with F and a word beginning with off, which I'm going to try not to swear on these, just because for me swearing and Doctor Who don't go together. It's very old-fashioned of me, I know, but if there is some young people like Doctor Who and they might sit through this nonsense, and if they do, I don't want them to hear me effing and jeffing. They're very sad, the Aridians, aren't they? But you would be if you lived on a planet that is very arid, that some fool had christened arid before, because it became arid. We hear from that story of it becoming arid. So was it called Aridius before it became arid? Which suggests a certain self-fulfilling prophecy. What is it? Nominative determinism. Although we are called Earth, and it's what it's made of. Although I suppose it should be called 90% water / Earth. Yeah, and William Hartnell's very good here. He accepts that these rather sad. They are rather sad. They're so sad. They seem like they're crying all the time, which could solve their aridity problems. Just keep being sad, and you will fill the world with an ocean of your tears. They haven't quite got, there's no credit for fish movement by Rosalind de Winter, but there is an attempt to suggest alien body language and speech patterns, which he works so well in close-up, doesn't he, Hartnell? Look at that. That's a terrific shot. Which, although it doesn't always come off, I think is laudable. I prefer you to have a go at that than just to, be a person in a suit, but otherwise your body language and your speech patterns are, you may as well be in a shop. That's a bit mean. But and of course, the Daleks are Nazis, and they, put prisoners to labour, and then they shoot them, and it's a slightly clumsy sequence that we didn't really see much of it. I don't know what the camera's doing. We have these sort of cameras at ground level, so we see Dalek skirts and people's feet. But the TARDIS being indestructible is a lovely, comforting thing, and I love the statement that makes, this ramshackle, rackety thing that that looks like a police box, for all its faults, and can never quite go where you want it to go. For all its faults, it's indestructible, and I feel a bit. That makes me feel slightly patriotic. I'm not a tub thumping jingoist, but I see this country as sort of punching above its weight. It's slightly ramshackle. It's a bit of a mess, but and it can look a bit clumsy, but it's indestructible. It does more than you would expect it to do, and yet whilst it does it has a sort of ramshackle charm about it. That's if you were to sum up what I like about this country and being British, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that, and there are many things I think are wrong, but also I think we knock ourselves. Oh, there's a boom mic. We knock ourselves quite a lot, but there's nothing wrong with trying to accentuate your positives as well. Doesn't mean you're, as I say, jingoistic. And I don't like jingoism and blind patriotism. That's very dangerous. But I think it's all right to go, sometimes we're all right. We do our best. Hartnell's really good in this. He is accepting that they have no choice. He's pragmatic. He's cold, but he's not being aloof. He's not being angry with them. He knows they've got to do what they've got to do, and he's not going to forgive them, but he's also not going to have a go at them. And do you know, one of these Aridians gets eaten by the Maya beast later on, and I've never managed to, and I've never looked it up either. I've never managed to work out which one it is. I wonder if I will be able to work it out this time. Probably not. I mean, I miss so much because the nature of this means I have to keep talking. Anyway, so plot-wise, what it means is that in these, stories, it's actually more about, what location are we in this week. The storylines have to be fairly simple, and this is a fairly straightforward one. If they meet some benign aliens who nonetheless are, cowed by the Daleks and forced to cooperate with the Daleks in order to hand over the time travelers. And that's pretty much the story of the week. But what it means is we get a different race of Doctor Who aliens. 2, because we get the Maya Beasts. This is a really good set. I'd forgotten, actually, how good some of these sets are. Because, again, they're not sets that last more than a week. And some of the outside sets aren't great. But these catacombs, they've got depth. And there's an attempt to do stalagmites/tights, and you've got enough depth to have the Aridians in the background to give it a bit of a sense of scale. And it's always nice to see an alien on screen in Doctor Who. Although these ones do sort of wander around being a bit lost, don't they? I'm sorry. What are they saying to each other? No idea. Oh, yeah, okay. Are they gold? I think they're probably gold, are they? I'd like to see some colour pictures. I mean, not that they're obviously men in leotards, but it's... so who is it that gets... So who's the one that gets... Who does get eaten? Somebody... One of them gets eaten here, trying to rescue... Is it Hewell Bennett? Does Hewell Bennett get eaten? We don't actually see... I'm sure it's in the script, but I've never looked at the script. And I'm sure it's in the book. And I don't think I've got the book, because it was one of the later books, wasn't it? My Target collection has a couple of gaps. And that's pretty... He's just ingested. The Maya Beast has just ingested alive Rinian or Prondin, or... They're all called things like that, aren't they? The Aridians. And so it's nighttime on Aridius, which, as I say, there's a shot. That's nice, though, the night sky above Ian. Nighttime is always atmospheric. Malsan is what Ian Thompson's called. Malsan, Rinian and Prondin, and Walk on Aridian. That wasn't on his CV. It's like, can you give me a name? Can't you call me Walkondin? Walkondin, that's what he's called from now on. Walkondin. Brian Proudfoot. Oh, look at them. They gleam in the studio light. They look fantastic. Something the Beatles reminded me of a very witty friend of mine. I can't remember who it was. I think it might have been Jim Smith. I've got lots of people I've met only a handful of times, but I, then consort with on social media. And there are some very funny and very inventive and creative people in the world of Doctor Who. Darrell among them, and I sometimes feel a bit like I've got away with something because I did my one-man show. I seem to, get various bits of work. I'm very lucky for being the funny Doctor Who guy. And there are lots of funny Doctor Who guys out there who are suppliers of great entertainment and insight on social media. And I remember sort of getting annoyed with somebody being... I had a whole running joke in a show that I actually cut out, and I would like to do something with it eventually. I named this person Barry, who's the guy that whenever anybody does something to do with Doctor Who, he updates their Wikipedia page. So Abraham Lincoln was the president of the United States who is best known for appearing in episode 1 of The Chase, and because there are some actors who've had great careers who, if they've been in Doctor Who, that is in their list of 2 or 3 things that they've done on Wikipedia, even if their contribution to Doctor Who is minor, and it doesn't mention, say, them being an associate artist of the Royal Shakespeare Company or whatever, because Doctor Who fans we still have that thing, and I understand the drive, because I was I very much, certainly when I was younger, the idea that the outside world had to have Doctor Who communicated to it, and Doctor Who's importance had to be underlined. And I was talking about this online somewhere, and I think it was Jim Smith, but yeah, Paul the Executioner's McCartney, which, the idea that the Beatles, among the things that they were best known for, was appearing in episode 1 of The Chase. And this is the sort of thing. This is sort of boys' own adventure stuff. Building a sort of a fake floor, a hidden entrance for something to tumble through. This was the sort of thing you read about in adventure stories. That's actually, I think, harder to do in real life than it is on telly. Oh yes, and so yeah. So this is going to lead to a shot that has been treated on this DVD, that in the original, because filming at night is so expensive, the studio we are at nighttime and the film sequence was in the day, and the jar between studio and film was even more pronounced. Here is the shot, is even more pronounced. It's great. But not on this DVD, where they've darkened it. On the original, it's in day. Oh, Ian, he's quite tough, isn't he? And this sometimes opens up the debate about what is restoration and what is tinkering. And I am great friends with the restoration team, and I have this chat in pubs. And when I speak to my friend who does the picture restoration, he makes for a very convincing case for, well, if you want it as is original, we wouldn't. You would have less of the film picture, because they actually pull out and show us a bit more than you would have actually seen, because of the way stuff was cropped in on the film recordings of various ways. So he sort of said, we'll never get it as it was broadcast. But we can do things to it to make it look as good as possible, and that includes perhaps tinting a shot that was never tinted. For me, as somebody who's a bit of an archaeologist, and I mean, I was wrong, but I was a bit dubious about Vidfire, because I was introduced to Doctor Who as scrappy old film prints, and that to me gave it part of its atmosphere. Obviously it looks closer to original broadcast with Vidfire, and it looks better, but of course I was comforted by the thing that was familiar. I hold my hands up, and I was wrong with that, and I think Vidfire is absolutely the right thing to do. The darkening of the thing, I think I would prefer it to look like it did when it was broadcast, but I totally understand the other argument. I also see no need for anger to be directed at anybody, because I think there are valid arguments either way. But, as I say, given my choice, even though I work very closely with, and in fact because of, the guys on the restoration team, who I all admire and like very much, I personally would prefer, and I remember being so cross with that shot, going, he's Richard Martin again, being really lazy. But it's a really good shot. It just doesn't marry with the studio, and that matches the technology that they had at the time and what they did at the time. So I think it should be there, warts and all. But it's because anyway, I think that's enough on that. What is my favourite thing for episode 2? Oh gosh, I think, and I'm sure Darrell isn't going to choose this, because I think we perhaps watch these things with a slightly different eye, which is okay. I was going to say perhaps it's the ruthlessness of the Daleks and their execution of those prisoners, but that was, I thought, slightly bungled in the shooting. I'm actually going to say William Hartnell's performance, because throughout the whole thing, his energy he's not doing an awful lot, but there's a sort of simmering danger there, which is not something we always see and associate with him. And I think William Hartnell's always great and always interesting, but I think we saw a dimension of him there that we don't always see, and it particularly struck me this time. So although I'm not always going to choose the Doctor, I don't think that's a cheat to go, an actor doing a thing, because I think Hartnell moulded his performance to the circumstances, and it helped to tell that story of the Aridians who were, forced to cooperate with the Daleks under threat of death, and the Doctor sort of accepts that whilst, realising that it has mortal consequences for the TARDIS crew, and he brings a lot of weight and gravity to that. What is Darrell going to say?
Reason two that I love The Chase is its 60s-ness. There is no other 60s story that is as 60s as The Chase is. People forget now that in the early 90s there was a big 1960s revival just before Britpop started. There were a lot of old black and white TV shows and music being re-released. So there was the Monkees and Batman and Star Trek on TV, and there was the Beatles anthology. And The Chase came out on video in that era as well. I think it was 1993 for the 30th anniversary. So that's actually tied in to that whole nostalgia. But when I was about 7 or 8 during that period, so I'm quite fondly predisposed to anything that's very kind of pure 60s, and The Chase is absolutely full of that. I think it's fair to say that The Chase is the most indicative of Dalek mania. It's the Dalek mania story. There's the Peter Cushing films at the cinema, but more so than Dalek Invasion of Earth, more so than Dalek's Master Plan, The Chase is on TV, the Dalek mania story. And I love it for it. It's so evocative of that moment in time when everybody knew what a Dalek was and everyone was making Dalek jokes. And what better Dalek joke than The Chase? There's something about this story which feels so much of its time that it's just like a time machine in itself. You watch that story, you are in 1965, just as much as listening to, Please Please Me or watching Batman or the Monkees. You are in that moment right there. And that's why I love The Chase. It's like my own personal time machine to the 60s.
Now, you see, that's a really good reason. I don't think he's doing episode-specific reasons, which is fine. That sort of instruction is that everybody's to... Because sometimes people have said, can I clarify what you want? And I've sort of gone, I want you, because I think we sometimes need reminding, especially when we see the sometimes madness and unkindness of Doctor Who fans on social media, that actually it's at its best and actually at its most typical, because the loudest voices are often the meanest and ones who've got fewest things to do. At its best, Doctor Who fandom is creative and exciting and funny. And once again, I go, I like William Hartnell's performance, and you've got somebody there encapsulating it so much more eloquently, and I think that's a really interesting take. And it terrifies me that actually everybody's take on Doctor Who is far more interesting than mine. But in a way, isn't it nice, therefore, that amongst a sea of my nonsense, there's a little lighthouse of intellectualism and wit provided by somebody else. Yeah, that's great. I like the idea of The Chase being a very 60s Doctor Who story, and it is the sort of cigarette card of Doctor Who TV, isn't it? Which and as Darrell's other choice showed, the production can't always live up to. You do wonder if Terry Nation's ever seen Doctor Who. But again, in those days, audiences knew that what was being done was sometimes a suggestion rather than, a literal rendition. I'm enjoying myself. I could have been lying in bed scrolling through terrible news and people yelling at each other. Instead, I'm watching sad aliens and moments of greatness and moments of silliness. That's Doctor Who in a nutshell, isn't it? Moments of greatness and moments of silliness. There'll be more of both, I'm sure, in the next edition, but I hope you're in a happy time and place. I am, and maybe next time, if you're not, we'll do our best to take you to one. I can't guarantee that the sets will be particularly good, because you'll only be with me for a week, but I'll do my best not to wobble too much. Thank you very much for watching. My name's Toby. Stay safe, be kind.
I think you'll find. I think you'll find. I think you'll find. I think you'll find.
Well, since this recording was made, I've got my hands on the script for episode 2 of The Chase, the script that was used in the studio, no less. And it reveals that the Aridian getting eaten, which one was it? Was it Malsan? Was it Orinian? Who was it? Was it Walk-On Aridian? In the script, none of the Aridians get eaten. So that was obviously decided during the course of rehearsal. Richard Martin obviously said, "You, over there, hurl yourself into the mouth of the Maya beast." So even looking at the script gives us no answer to the mystery as to which Aridian gets eaten. So there we go. I'm sure the eagle-eyed of you can look and work it out, but I've tried and failed. But failure is one of the basic freedoms. Anyway, I think you'll find I still don't know the answer to the identity of Aridian Lunch, of Maya Beast 11's. So there we go. That's what keeps us coming back to this programme, is the mysteries. Some of them, they are just unsolvable. Well, greetings. Hello, Fact fans. You'll have noticed I've moved position on the sofa. That's because the denizens of Hadoke Towers have been for a walk and now they're drying off and trying to have a snooze whilst I talk through episode 3 of The Chase. And to do that, I'm going to press play in 3, 2, 1... well, yes, welcome. I've moved over. I had a slight technical issue with the previous episode where this camera, podcast listeners, I have 2 cameras. You can see these on video on YouTube if you haven't found them. I'm not quite sure how I'm releasing them yet, but that's all part of the excitement of the unfolding text and the developing scenarios of happy times and places. But this just cut out for some reason halfway through, and I'd done a lot of... I know my marks. I've done a lot of acting to camera that is now lost forever. Anyway, in checking what had gone wrong, and I still don't know, I did notice I look a bit of a mess. I think perhaps I could have done better in certain aspects of my career if I'd been a bit more conscious of my appearance. But who cares? I look a bit of a mess, but I'm trying to have fun. And if there's not a better metaphor for the chase, I don't know what is. It's a funny old hybrid, isn't it, of this. Again, they're so jolly, this TARDIS crew, which I think under some circumstances might grate, but they invest the whole thing with a lot of fun. That's a great moving camera there from Martin, and Ian's got a painful head. So, Flight Through Eternity. That's an interesting title. It's full of sort of all-encompassing titles that don't necessarily have anything to do with, what's going on in the story. Things like The End of Tomorrow. Well, you could call any Doctor Who story The End of Tomorrow because there's always threat, isn't there? They're always doing a flight through eternity. I mean, that could be a title for Doctor Who itself. But I like that. It's a bit more mythic than... it goes through phases, doesn't it, Doctor Who? There's the Bidmead era where it's just the name of the planet they're on quite often, Logopolis and Frontios, which I always found a bit bland. I was like, oh, come on, the Hungry Earth's much better than Frontios. But Flight Through Eternity, yeah, I rather like. It's a nice high shot from ambitious Richard Martin, who I'm forgiving for the things that don't work. And I don't know if this works, this funky jazz music. I like Dudley Simpson a lot. He's a legend. I like shots of the TARDIS in flight, but this is a very early... Is it in fact? It is, isn't it? It's the first... This story is the first time we see the TARDIS in flight in that regard. And there's another cutout thing doing the business to make an arresting visual. A cutout Dalek. But I think with, a small 60s telly and the sort of reception they had then, I think that would have looked fine. It looks okay now. I think the design's brilliant. I love all the spinny things on the. I think in fact I have a sticker of that from somebody's Redbubble store, because I've got a door panel that's looking a bit bland. The panel up to the attic is looking a bit bland, and it looks like a bit like a hole because I painted it a dark colour. So I wanted a flash of colour on it, a flash of white on it, to show that it's actually solid rather than that there's a gap in the way to the attic. So it's on my to-do list, is to put the spinny TARDIS wall control on that. Oh, there's a funny sort of... Is he a dummy Dalek at the back? Somebody will know. Gavin Rymel will have he has various websites and videos where he talks in detail about every Dalek prop. So I'm not even going to compete. I've asked Gavin to contribute to this podcast, and he's preparing a story. Not a Dalek story, though, but he is the Dalek guy. Ian looks like he's in... he looks like he's in episode 1 of The Mind Robber. Gosh, Ian and Barbara in both rocking the old roll neck look there. But yeah, Ian looks like Jamie does when he's had his personality taken away from him and he's turned all white in the void of The Mind Robber. So I'm sure somebody clever could chop Ian out of this and place them in the white void of The Mind Robber and create some sort of world of fiction escapade for Ian Chesterton. Barbara's eating shit. Barbara looks like she's vaping, because I've got half an eye on this and half an eye on the camera and half an eye on making sure that the sound is working. Barbara, that's a very juddery shot of the Empire State Building. Barbara looks like she's vaping. I've got a feeling they had to find the stock footage of this and find a clean version or something. There's something about the stock footage of this that caused a bit of a headache. Or maybe didn't. There's an anecdote. I recall something that might have happened and might not have done, but something has chimed. So this is, we assume, 20th century, modern day, current day Earth. There's no attempt to make it a period piece. So aside from Planet of Giants, this is the first sort of contemporary Doctor Who story to do. Oh, I like the rather rotund extra nudging somebody out of the way. That's a lovely attention to detail.
And this is Arnie Gordon, who was a South African actor, but he's decided to, and he's Frostar in The Web Planet, so
he spent his previous Doctor Who talking eyes,
and now he's playing the tour guide as Columbo in a bus conductor's hat. Which I kind of like.
The film looks gloriously cleaned up in this restoration. So whatever the thing is I alluded to that I can't remember, that they did the thing very well. I do like the sort of the hats and the specs and the sort of costuming policy for the tourists who all have their own thing going on. And all hail Peter Purvis. I love that he's just not Peter Purvis out of the way. I've never really noticed the big guy before. I mean, I knew there was a big guy extra, but I didn't realise he was quite so belligerent. And the young guy there, I should find out about them. I'll probably, do you know what I'm probably going to spend my Saturday now doing, is looking up those extras and finding out if they're dead. Because that's what I do. Oh dear. This is Peter Purvis, a Doctor Who legend and a very nice man, who I have to say does give it his. Even the litter has got litter around the litter. There's some nice attention to detail here on the Empire State Building. but yes, this scene makes it very difficult when you're. I remember I was writing something about the War Machines for Doctor Who magazine, and the War Machines is, you know, the first story set in 20th century modern day Earth, which has become a norm, but for the 60s and certainly the Hartnell era was, you know, unusual. But you can't say that now because there's this segment here which could well be. It's not stated, I don't think, although he refers to Cheyenne Brody, doesn't he? So he refers to a television program, but and it's likely, yes, it's likely that it's 20th century Earth, but it's not a story set in 20th century Earth. But again, you can't use that shorthand for the War Machines anymore, lest somebody say, I think you'll find. So when you've got a limited word count, you have to couch it in various parentheses in order to bat off somebody calling you to order, which means you get to write less interesting things about Doctor Who because you have to, as I say, a lot of the writing of things is anticipating complaints from people who could take you to task, or be generous and sort of give you the benefit of the doubt and know what you mean. But have you met any Doctor Who fans? So apart from Planet of Giants, which again isn't about being set in the modern day, it's about being small. This is until we get to the War Machines, this is our little sojourn into the modern day. And Peter Purves is great. He's going for it, and thank goodness he is, because otherwise it would. You know, why would we want to spend any time with this guy? He's basically a comic interlude with a hick, and I can sort of see. It's odd though to think, isn't it? He comes and does this, you know, very bold comic turn. 3 weeks later, he's a regular playing a totally different character. And you sort of say, oh, and they wouldn't do that these days. Freema Agyeman was good in an episode, and they liked her and brought her back. Although it was, there was a break between, there was at least a season break, but it was the next, you know, it was a couple of episodes later. It was the next story. So perhaps things don't change as much as we think they do. And certainly, you know, luck, but also capitalizing on that luck. He got a nice little part, and he obviously was nice to work with. And he had a bash. And Morton Dill, I think, is good fun. It's genuinely funny. And I think he means it to be. You know, it's not funny because it's you know, he has pitched it with intent to go where it is. Oh dear, I'm laughing like Elaine Page on Sunday if I'm not careful. And I'm not sure that it is wise to have somebody laughing at a Dalek. I mean, I can see why, but that's great, isn't it? You never see a Dalek go 360. I think my friend Peter told me that's the only time you see a Dalek go. It's eye struck go all the way round. It may have done it in the modern series. I've not watched that as much because I've had. When did I first see this? When I was about 10. I've had 36 years to watch this over and over again. The new series is only 15 years old. But actually, the Dalek does look, because it's squat and he's tall. Even though he's sending it up, it looks quite scary. But I think that this does two serious things. One, it shows that Terry Nation and Dennis Spooner and Richard Martin have kind of gone, well, we've done the Daleks being scary. What else can we do? Let's have them coughing at sand, and let's have somebody not be scared of them but laugh at them. I know where they're coming from. I'm not sure it's wise, even though it's very entertaining. And the Dalek held its own by that. Really, you know, it was inscrutable, and it did the thing with the head, but it didn't kill him. Now, you know, it's almost like it's going, he's a comedy character. it would spoil the tone if I killed him. And of course now he's gonna get committed to an asylum. I mean, no. Has he got has that tour guide got a fag? He's holding something between his fingers. What's he got there? I don't know. No, maybe not. Fags in Doctor. The fat guy has a cardigan though. I should have a checklist, shouldn't I, for fags and cardigans in Doctor Who? I just. I think I probably know of a fan group who'd refer to themselves as fags and cardigans, but that's a whole different thing. I like the break on the Empire State Building, even though I'm not sure I should. It's a guilty pleasure. And should there be any such thing as a guilty pleasure? Because what you're essentially saying is, I like something other people might judge me for liking. That's essentially what you're saying. If you like something, doesn't matter what anybody else thinks. Just like it and don't apologise. So, yeah, everybody, I like the Empire State Building. I like the fact that the tour guide is a monoptera playing Columbo. And this is... And again, when I read about this, the punchline to this sequence, that was very exciting to me. The idea that Doctor Who could have a conduit to Abraham Lincoln. This was a Doctor Who story that had Abraham Lincoln. It had the Beatles. It solved the mystery of... Spoiler alert. I mean, if you're watching this and you haven't watched The Chase yet, stop immediately. It's one of my favourite things in commentaries when somebody goes, can I say a thing about this scene or will it spoil it for the viewer? No. You just go, no. If anybody is listening to the commentary before they've watched the story, they deserve to have it ruined for them. So, folks, this is the Mary Celeste. But I had books of, the Piccolo Book of Mysteries, I think, and it was a thing we talked about, I think, mentioned at school and around the dinner table, the mystery. We loved the mystery of the Devil's Footprints, the mystery of the Mary Celeste. And so Doctor Who having the Beatles and Abraham Lincoln and the Mary Celeste, even the Empire State Building was a thing. I know we take stuff for granted now because we could see pictures and we could go places more than we could. The Empire State Building is an amazing thing. Well, did I read recently somewhere that it's not the Empire State Building? I'm not going to go there. That is Dennis Chinnery, who is Garman in Genesis of the Daleks. So he comes back and is far more serious with the Daleks. And he's also Professor Sylvester in The Twin Dilemma. So he's run the whole gamut of Doctor Who. No longer with us, but a nice actor. He's also in that episode of The Prisoner where nobody says anything. Many happy returns. Nobody says anything in English for something like the first 40 minutes. So he and John Lorrimore are German gunrunners. That's a great idea, isn't it? That's a really sort of disconnecting idea, that episode of The Prisoner where what dialogue there is isn't in the English language until I think the prisoner gets home, or is it home? Brilliant. I'm not here to talk about The Prisoner, although I can if I want, can't I? Comedy knocking on the head, because this would not be as amusing as it looks. Although you didn't give it an awful lot of welly there, Maureen, but that's because of health and safety and no stunt doubles. And we get Ian comedy knocked on the head. I'd forgotten. I forget we get comedy concussion, which Ian, William Russell, is very good at. He's I'm terribly sorry, poor old hapless Vicky. Oh, William Russell is doing very good comedy concussion there. So yeah, the idea that Doctor Who would solve the mystery of the Mary Celeste was one of those things that when you read about it, you went, oh, of course, what a brilliant idea. And it must be the sort of, I imagine them sort of sitting around, the table in the 60s where, smoking pipes and being clever and sort of going, what can we do for the children this week? Let's have the TARDIS and the Daleks arrive on the Mary Celeste. because that's a hot topic. Oh, by the way, if you can hear a groaning noise, it's not the TARDIS, it's not a Maya beast, it's a snoring cockapoo called Bernard, who's back from his walk and sitting where I was before, which is why I've changed my position. If you're listening to the podcast, you'll just have to imagine it. The captain here is David Blake Kelly, who is also in The Smugglers, and is also, I think it's now been changed on Wikipedia, sometimes wishfully changed to being David Kelly, the Irish actor who's, Mr. O'Reilly in Fawlty Towers and The Man from Robin's Nest. David Kelly and David Blake Kelly, both Irish actors, but both different, which is why they have different names and don't look the same. But reference resources on the internet don't necessarily count such things. Patrick Carter only died a couple of years ago, and he was in Quatermass 2, and I always meant to write to him. He was still turning up in things like London's Burning when I was younger, playing the bosun. Character actor, did loads of stuff. Excellent sideburns. Cardigans, fags and sideburns in Doctor Who I'd love to do a tally of. And again, I probably know a few fan groups that consist of cardigans, fags and sideburns. Obviously that water is quite still, although that adds to the mystery, of course. The Mary Celeste was, I think, in still waters. That's nice. I like the roundy thing turning into a scanner, which is a round shape, because the Daleks have roundels and round eyes, and there's a bit of spare signal howl around going there that they've thrown in for good measure. I think that looks like a close-up of some of the title sequence tests, but I could be wrong. I was just sent them the other day. Willoughby, Douglas Ditter. Yes, don't know anything about him. It's a good name though, isn't it? Douglas Ditter. Yeah, why don't I know anything about Douglas Ditter? I presume I've looked him up and tried to find him and forgotten. I'm presuming he's probably no longer with us, otherwise he'd be on my list of people that I don't think are no longer with us that I've never found. But I can't recall offhand. And of course then we go into a film sequence, which is rather impressive with all of this stuntage. Although for something that is effectively in places a comedy sequence, and considering we know what happens, that's a woman with a baby who's falling into the sea and is going to die. I think perhaps that's an excellent stunt there though, and a nicely shot from above. That's really well done. So all the actors have had to come to be on film, but I do question the comedy value of a woman and baby perishing at sea. I mean, call me old-fashioned. It's interesting that the Daleks are quite reluctant to exterminate people in this episode. They just sort of allow people to jump to their own deaths, or in the case of Peter Purvis, do a comedy sequence. I like the way he takes his hat and jacket off. He's like the captain. Everyone else panics a bit and either falls in or jumps in. But because he's the captain, he takes his hat and his jacket off to at least do the escape with some sort of formality. I think that's a nice touch from the actor. But we basically there have mass death played for. Well, is it played for? The actors don't really play it for comedy, but I think the story wants us to find it quite funny. Jack Pitt, who we at last get to see, he's been a venom grub, and I think he's a gubbage cone later on. Names to conjure on your CV. And he was a sort of there is an interview with him on Keith Mythmakers did an interview with him, which I was very pleased about, because he'd never been interviewed in Doctor Who magazine and stuff like that, and they found him and dug him out, and he recalled sharing digs, I think, with Hartnell, and it's nice. Oh, there's a broken Dalek. Dalek's got a broken bit on it there. They're starting to go through the wars, but yes, it's nice that Jack Pitt, having been a monster, gets his face in shot, even if it's just, you don't quite know why there's a lagging cabin boy who gets to jump off camera, not even on film, but it just adds a little coda to this scene. And this is actually quite creepy with the picture, fading between shot, and now you can hear the rope, and you've got the silence. That's very atmospheric, and the reason for that is and the untouched meal, and the reason for that is, oh no, that's not an untouched meal, but we did see one earlier, is because we are on a boat called the Mary Celeste. We still haven't got there yet. As I'm talking, I keep waiting for them to show the Mary Celeste. I remember being quite surprised when I saw that, because I thought it was Marie. I still think it might be, but I could be wrong on that. It might be spelt two different ways. Look it up. I don't have all the answers, but I remember certainly thinking, oh, if they spelt that wrong. And I think I then did look it up, and I think it's okay to be either. I don't know. Look it up. If this inspires you to read about the mystery of the Mary Celeste. Yeah, Mary Celeste. But I like that. It's like Pudding Lane. It's like the explanation for why crows say doctor. Anything that sort of intrudes into our real world, or has a cheeky wink at a mystery that we have, I rather like. It makes Doctor Who seem important. Although when Doctor Who's too important, I don't like it. I don't want him to be a legend thread through time. I want the Doctor, him or her, them, to be... I want them to be a plucky amateur that just happens to save the universe through wits and a good nature and reading a lot. Journey into Terror. Again, that's one of those all-encompassing episode titles coming next. They might call it Stuff Happens in Space and Time. Oh, top billing to Arne Gordon there, because it's order of speaking. I wonder if David Blake Kelly got a credit in the Radio Times. I don't know if he got a... I can't remember. Doesn't matter. Only I will care. But I might go and look that up now. That was jolly. So it was Empire State Building and Mary Celeste. What is Darrell going to choose? I keep forgetting I've got to choose something. So I have to pause the video first. It's not a video, it's a DVD. I will say video till the day I die. So now that I have cessated the cassette, what has Darrell chosen? I've got to choose something before Darrell chooses, which is good because it buys me time to find it. It's got to be... Now, he's not choosing specific things from episodes, I don't think. So he might just choose the sort of general comedy feel or something. I think Peter Purves. I think the fact that he entered that with such gusto and did enough to get cast in a regular 3 weeks later is a testament to an actor who I think had been out of work for a bit, and he'd been turned down. He'd auditioned for the Web Planet and hadn't got the part. So I think the lesson there is, a disappointment might lead to something else that ultimately leads to a better part. And if you are, an artist, a performer, whatever you want to call them, we don't have to be so highfalutin as to say artist, a creator, a turn, a vagabond, a strolling player, somebody who just wants to make stuff. It can be hard and it can be full of disappointment. But Peter Purves auditioned for a role for a director. He didn't get the role. He was spared having to be trussed up in a harness and flown over the studios dressed as a space moth, and instead comes back a few weeks later to play a stupid hillbilly, and probably went, it's only one episode. I could have been in 3 episodes as the space moth. But then it leads to him being a regular, and it leads to the fact that still to this day, people talk to him and he's very gracious and happy to talk about Doctor Who, and it's still a big part of his life. So I like that. And so I'm not just picking his performance, I'm picking the story of what got Peter Purves to there, and the flight through eternity that it took him on that reaches us to now and beyond. What does Darrell say?
Reason number 3, got right time 3, that I love The Chase is its light entertainmentness, its variety, it's a sketch show. There's no other Doctor Who story quite like this. Now, obviously, Terry Nation came from a comedy writing background, more so than a sci-fi writing background. That was kind of a side thing that got out of hand. And he really tries it on in The Chase to just make it a comedy show full of sketches. There's the stuff on the time-space visualizer. There's all, the episodes later on, the haunted house, a skyscraper, the Marry Celeste. It's very sketchy, and there's something refreshing about The Chase, which is as refreshing as watching a sketch show. You get all these things, and it's just trying to delight you and make you laugh. I mean, it's not funny. It's not really funny on purpose at any point. Sad to say, I don't think there's any... Maybe the thick Dalek is quite funny, but it has the same energy as a comedy programme, and I love it for that.
I nearly chose the comedy, didn't I? But I got distracted. I went to the comedy of Peter Purvis, and then it metamorphosed into his story. So I like to think Darrell and I did slightly have contact for a moment there. And I love the fact that's so forgiving as well. It's not very funny, and yet it's trying. And people might say, well, you'll have a lot of sympathy with that, Toby. And it's making me, very kindly disposed towards it, actually, because, and it's funny, isn't it, when people get annoyed with comedians or are rude to comedians on Twitter, or use anybody that says so-called comedian or comedian inverted commas when talking to somebody who is an actual comedian, is an automatic sin bin for me. Because actually they're trying to be funny and using an old and easily dismantleable trope. But anybody that, reserves their ire for somebody that's trying to make you laugh, I mean, even if they fail, the intention, at least they're trying to make you laugh. They're not trying to bump into you like a rotund extra on the Empire State Building. They're not trying to nick your wallet. They're trying to entertain. And if they fail, well, at least their intentions are pure, which, is all that this is about. Having a bash to lighten your day and make you connect with the things that you like about Doctor Who, the good things, the not very funny things, the not very funny times and places of Doctor Who. We'll go to another one of those next time, but for now, thanks for watching and listening.
I think you'll find. I think you'll find. Not for the first time on this commentary, I would like to point out that the Gavin Rymill Dalek Design website I mention is actually the work of both Gavin and John Green, who founded the website. It's called Dalek 6388. It's a fantastic piece of work. I urge you to go and check it out. I always look forward to having a look at it and finding out the brilliant things they have to say about a Doctor Who story. I look forward to it almost as much as I look forward to a release of one of these podcasts that post-dates the time I was pointed out the oversight of missing John's name out. So John, I will say your name a lot. He's been very, very nice about it. I'm just pointing it out. I'd also like to point out that David Blake Kelly, guest star of The Chase Episode 3, is not given special billing in the Radio Times, but he is mentioned in the publicity that went out about the story. So I knew somebody had flagged him up somewhere, if it's nowhere anybody has actually seen in about 50 years. But it's important to me.
Right, well, we have a Richard Martin high angle on the video. If you're listening to the podcast, you'll just have to imagine the top of my balding pate. You may just be imagining the episode, but if you're watching along, it's time to press play in 3, 2, 1. Episode 4 of The Chase, which is a journey into terror. I was going to go to bed, if you've been watching this in order, which is what I would recommend. I did the first 3 episodes this morning. I was going to go to bed, but it's Halloween as I record this. So I thought I'd stay up and have a spooky night in a haunted house. I've just watched Nigel Neal's adaptation of The Woman in Black. Whoa. This is very clever from Terry Nation, because you go, well, if it's just a chase, they can just keep going. And he'd got an episode ending he needed to sort out. He just goes, oh, they've shaved 5 minutes off. What? 4 minutes off. What does that mean? Well, they just have. How? They just have. They're getting closer, which means that suddenly the chase is finite, and it means that you can just sort of chuck in an episode ending when you want to. Journey into Terror. Now, I remember getting the Discontinuity Guide, which is a very important book in my development. And it did that thing of, which I sort of hate now, but it was very refreshing then. And I don't hate the Discontinuity Guide. I just think that everyone's so keen to pick out mistakes now. But it was because I think I'd seen so much Doctor Who. It was actually refreshing to have, you can see the back of the TARDIS there, though that's a nice high-angle shot with smoky cauldrons and things. It was refreshing to suddenly start looking for mistakes that they pointed out, because I'd kind of done Doctor Who. I'd started collecting episodes when I was 11 or 12 or something, and by now I was 19, 20, so I'd watched all the episodes a gazillion times. So to suddenly be looking for things that the writers of the Discontinuity Guide pointed out, although they didn't point out the wire on that bat, but of course I was watching in much worse quality, and so were they probably. And the reason I bring that up here is because this is an episode that has a lot of mistakes in it. But in keeping with the Abraham Lincoln, the Beatles, the Mary Celeste, you now go Universal horror films, which were, I would stay up late, on nights like this, and they would be shown, after midnight. I even made a scrapbook. And there was something about the old, black and white, spooky, with actors like Bela Lugosi and Boris Karloff, who you knew were dead. So it was like the past was talking to you. They were ghosts themselves. We were entertained by, skeletons, as it were. I found those so scary. So again, the idea that, Terry Nation is not daft. Every episode is a headline. This is what's really scary. Dracula and Frankenstein. Actually, you know that Frankenstein's the name of the doctor, not the monster. Shut up. I will. And this is... And... But you're doing... You're mining it for the comedy, Maureen O'Brien, and that's actually quite right, because it means it's manageable terror for the youngsters. And look, that's great. That's a spooky moment. But one of my happiest memories of Doctor Who, and my lucky experiences, centres around this episode, which I'm looking forward to doing. But they've done the very Terry Nation thing of they've split up. And of course, there's a photo call, isn't there, of the Doctor with the two copyright infringing Universal horrors. Well, certainly as we'll see, the Frankenstein's monster design is. Oh, that was a nice sudden cut. It's not Frankenstein's monster. It's Universal Pictures' Frankenstein's monster. That was a nice quick cut after the skeleton dropped in. That's actually rather creepy. And yeah, that's really nice. Seeing the ghost, the grey lady passing through here, and seeing it in sort of tarted up quality, it's actually more effective than the sort of slightly grubby video, because you could, it seemed like a genuine spook and a genuine ghost. That's quite a nice high angle down into the laboratory. it's a very curious white outfit that I'm guessing it's not white that Ian's got on. Frankenstein, John Maxim, and I think he's credited as Frankenstein, isn't he? Not Frankenstein's monster, but that's what we called him. We called him Frankenstein, and we. Just you think Frankenstein and Doctor Who have a little bit of a chat going, yeah, everyone calls me Frankenstein and that's the name of the creator. That's nothing, mate. Everyone calls me Doctor Who and that's the name of the programme, not the character. You sure about that? Credited as Doctor Who. What about that bit in the War Machines? That hasn't happened yet. Oh, okay. I like the cobwebs and the haunted housey steps and set. Vicky is very cheeky. And of course, Frankenstein is sort of Dracula is dubbed because obviously it turns out that he's a robot, isn't he? He's an android in an exhibition. Although that's not massively clear, to the extent that in the DVD commentary of this, Peter Purvis, who's moderating when they leave here, and I think the doctor goes, I think we must have been in the human mind. And they're not. The doctor is wrong. The doctor leaves here without ever knowing the truth because he doesn't see the sign that says, what is it, Festival of Ghana, haunted house exhibit or whatever. It's an exhibit. It's a museum. It's not massively clear. It's sort of expecting the audience to pick up quite a lot from a sort of closing shot reveal, as I recall. We've got that to look forward to. But the clues are there with the bad dubbing of Dracula is deliberate, I think. I've no idea. That's another nice high shot of Jacqueline Hill. It's actually very effectively done, this. And, leaning against a wall that disappears. There's a lot of, hokey old stuff that is hokey old stuff because it was used a lot because it works and it's good for a reason. And it's actually quite nice seeing it in Doctor Who because Doctor Who doesn't do horror that much. It's certainly not sort of universal horror and certainly not at this stage in the show's history. But the screaming grey lady, I don't quite know what she says. Is Rosalind de Winter, who was Vrestin, the leader of the Menoptera, and of course helped with the choreography of the Menoptera, which leads to the legendary credit on the closing titles of the web planet of Insect Movement by Rosalind de Winter, which I have on a t-shirt somewhere. And she has never been interviewed on record about Doctor Who, but I, thanks to a friend, got an address for her, and she wrote me a letter declining to be interviewed, but actually did a couple of pages of sort of memories and stuff, and is still down under. And I've got a photograph of her from Spotlight from the time, so I know what she looks like. Might put those in the show notes because I think it's quite nice sometimes to see what people look like who we don't actually see their face of in Doctor Who. We see her face in this, but it's a bit sort of under makeup, and we certainly don't know what she looks like. And that's a nice touch. These two obviously get on, and while we miss I think the sort of frosty relationship they have in the early years is really interesting. I think it would have got a bit tiresome if it had always been that much of a tetchy dynamic between them. And as I've mentioned before, I love the way that they get on and that they bounce off each other. These four, I want to be with them. I don't. I feel like I was intruding. I'm happy to be a not so silent but accompaniment to their travels. Oh, the TARDIS has arrived. Yeah, so Yes, on the DVD commentary, sorry, I have to try and not get distracted. Peter Purvis, actually, he says, he responds to the Doctor saying, "Oh, we're in the human mind," going, "I don't think that works. That's, Doctor Who's never done anything like that." And they go, "No, that's it's because that's not what the answer is." So Peter took his cue from William Hartnell and had missed the sign at the end. So it wasn't clear to them when they were prepping the DVD commentary of this, which suggests perhaps it's perhaps not clear enough. And I think I only sort of really knew because I think there was a question in the Doctor Who quiz book saying what were Frankenstein and Dracula exhibits in or whatever, and it was the Festival of Ghana. Is it the 1966 Festival of Ghana? Is it 1996? We'll see. But so I knew. Hello, the Dalek. Oh, had we seen that? I think we'd seen that a Dalek hanging around earlier, hadn't we? I was banging on. There is a Dalek that you can spot hanging around before the Daleks have arrived. I like the fact that Frankenstein is in his bandages because then you get a bit of mummy thrown in for good measure as well. John Maxim playing Frankenstein was Maxim. I think his real name was John Wills. I think he's credited as John Wills when he plays a Cyberman in Tomb of the Cybermen. In one of the cyber stories. I think he obviously called himself Maxim sometimes because it suggests size, and getting parts for tall actors is good. You may as well highlight it. And Malcolm Rogers is playing Dracula, and he's still about. I've seen him on stage. I saw him in The Crucible at Regent's Park Open Air Theatre. I say recently. It was probably about 10 years ago. But he's also one of the policemen in... Oh, she was waiting for her cue there, wasn't she? I watched this with... Sorry, I'll finish the Malcolm Rogers point. He's one of the policemen in the Feast of Stephen episode of the Daleks Master Plan. I watched this on stage with Maureen O'Brien. Or maybe it was a bit earlier when she was being spooked with Barbara, and she found it so funny for somebody that had a reputation for not liking Doctor Who. It's not at all, and she was so gracious, and so she's just that's brilliant. That's brilliant. Frankenstein picking up and smashing a Dalek, the Grey Lady saying some old thing. And that's actually really spooky. The sort of ghost turning to negative and laughing and not dying. This is much creepier than I'd remembered. Maybe it's because I've just watched The Woman in Black and it's Halloween. But I'd remembered this being an absolute disaster. And actually, I think it's pretty neat. And it's separated the TARDIS crew, including from Vicky, Maureen O'Brien, who I watched this with on stage at the 50th anniversary thing at the XL Arena. And she got the giggles and found it so funny. And there was something about the atmosphere of the day. And I couldn't stop laughing. And my friend Michael McManus was there. And he realised this was quite a special moment because it was genuinely very funny. Festival of Ghana 1996. Cancelled by Peking. There's a whole story in that. Frankenstein's House of Horrors. It's a ghost train. It's not an exhibition, but a fun fair ghost train type of thing. But I think that leaves the audience to fill in quite a lot of blanks there. And also, why was the Festival of Ghana cancelled because of Peking? Interesting. There's all sorts of worldwide politics possible there. But it's one of my favourite times of all my lucky things that I've got to do as being a ubiquitous bore on various Doctor Who projects. I'm sorry about that, everybody. and getting to interview Maureen was how killingly funny she found that, and how infectious that was. And my friend Michael McManus, bless him, realised that I really ought to have a photo of that, and he took a couple of photos of that moment, and I treasure them because it makes me smile to think of it. Is this the bit with the thick Dalek? Oh, no, it's not. I mustn't. I hope I haven't missed the thick Dalek, because that's something worth a bit of a conversation. Oh, of course. Now then, this is the robot Doctor Who now, which, seeing as we've just had an android Dracula who's badly dubbed, it seems to be tempting fate to then have somebody else playing an android who of Doctor Who is badly dubbed, not for any reason other than that they've actually just really badly dubbed him. These Daleks look great though, don't they? Oh, so no, it's not they'll reveal the robot Doctor later. So something else happens that I've completely forgotten about in this story, because what happens between now and the end of the episode, which is the reveal of the robot Doctor, I cannot for the life of me recall. It's been a long day. You joined me at the very beginning of it when I couldn't sleep this morning, and now it's the very end of it and I was going to go to bed, but this is my Halloween treat. And there she is. There's Vicky with her hair in bunches, being curious and pesky and terrific. She's a really good actress, Maureen O'Brien, as her subsequent career demonstrates. She's also written books. And it's interesting, they sort of went for she's a different character from Susan, but they went for a similar age bracket to replace her, whether they don't replace Ian and Barbara with a man and a woman. I do think 4 regulars is quite a lot to manage, and I think that 1 male, 1 female, that's really creepy actually. A sort of shadow, a ghost of the Doctor, forming in that booth. This is, although there's been some, comedy larks, especially at the beginning when Vicky and Barbara were doing their sort of scared bit. This is much more serious and slightly creepier than I imagined, than I'd remembered. And I've certainly enjoyed this much more than I thought I had. This proves how valuable to me, if not to you, this process has been, to be watching this in a frame of mind where I'm set to enjoy it. Has been really valuable, because I've emerged with a greater respect for the chase than I've ever had before. I like that. I like that bit of a tenseness. Having said how nice it was that they weren't tense anymore and that they had a really nice relationship, I like that that bit of an argument between the 2 men. Because they weren't actually getting at each other, but it's because tension is high. Oh, quite right, Ian. TARDIS seems very big, doesn't it? No, you don't. You don't. Come on. You've definitely got to go and get Vicky. Oh, yeah, and so it's big. Although it's a series of episodes, sort of individual settings, there is a momentum. We're heading to a climax. Is this the bit with the thick Dalek? Yeah. Who decided that the thing to do with these creatures that terrify a generation of children is to have them coughing as they come out of the sand and then want to go, time, 4 minutes. We've never, I don't think we've ever had before or since a thick Dalek. And I think they probably learnt from their mistakes with that one. But, yeah. But I suppose they're trying things out and learning what works and what doesn't. I think I could have told them that for free. Here's the robot Doctor Who, played by Edmund Warwick, who had stood in at the last minute for Hartnell at the end of... in the middle of Dalek Invasion of Earth when he hurt himself. And I remember Edmund Warwick's local paper, he was in a nursing home or something, found him or did an interview with him. And he said, I played Doctor Who, you know. And so there was a lovely interview with Edmund Warwick, who was called Edmund. So I think I assumed he was dead because it was a very old man's name, that. I remember being thrilled when my friends phoned me and said, oh, yes, in a local paper they've done an interview with Edmund Warwick. So he was... Oh, and he's in The Keys of Marinus, of course, as the scientist Darius, who gets attacked by his own... by the jungle. And again, so you've had Dracula and Frankenstein and the Beatles, and this is like Partridge in a Pear Tree, and the Mary Celeste, and... it's like one of those games where they show you a tray full of things and you have to recall them all. But all these set pieces, and now they go, oh, how can we beat Dracula and Frankenstein? Let's have the Doctor have to fight the Doctor. And again, I think I remember it was in the Doctor Who quiz book. It said, what story did these episode titles come from? And of course, it says next episode, the death of Doctor Who. You go, that's... You know, that promises the death of Doctor Who. And, of course, he's set it up that it's nice because we will have the death of Doctor Who. It just will be the robot double of Doctor Who. But I've seen death used as a threat in more recent episodes where it's much more metaphorical than that. Rose Tyler, this is the story of my death. Well, not really my death. I was put on a list. But, I mean, the... having the robot Doctor in long shot played by somebody else, and then in close up played by William Hartnell, sort of makes sense. Were it not for the fact it's not in that long shot, I suppose we have to make allowances for the fact that this is much better quality than people would have watched it in at the time. Although my friend Peter actually refutes that, because that's the thing that Peter Purvis also says. And Peter goes, "No, actually." My friend says, no, it would have been pretty good quality. But anyway, yeah, the robot Doctor Who, I'm looking forward to seeing in the next episode, because if I remember this episode being a mess, I certainly remember the next episode being a mess. So that will be quite interesting. But yeah, I found that thoroughly rewarding. The haunted house is a spooky thing. Dracula and Frankenstein are... spooky creation. So I think the idea of getting those iconic universal horror things, which were scary. I mean, they were obviously scary in the 30s, but they were scary to me as a kid in the 80s. So I think they still retained their power. So they certainly will have done in the 60s. And to put them in the Doctor Who scenario was a very canny thing to do. It's a shorthand for really, really scary. So I think putting universal horrors in an episode of Doctor Who is my thing from episode 4 of The Chase. What is Darrell's? Darrell has chosen his thing, which is...
Number D is that The Chase is like a toy box. At this point in history, more so than any other point, Doctor Who was a game played in playgrounds by children and at home with Dalek toys, and they were mixing the Dalek toys up with their other toys. And this story really reflects that. You get the haunted house I already mentioned, which it's like a child playing with the different toys. They're putting a Dalek in one play set, or they're getting a teddy bear. And this story, more like anything else, I know the Stephen Moffat era really tried to replicate what it was like for how a child would think about Doctor Who, but nothing is a patch on The Chase and how it does that. And there's something about Doctor Who and kind of indoor games which it has a strange combination of anyway. I'm thinking about the floor in Death of the Daleks and the identical floor in The Five Doctors. And of course, The Five Doctors is about playing with kind of figures. And there's things like the Celestial Toymaker and the Doll's House in Night Terrors as well. But something Doctor Who feels like an indoor game to me sometimes, and The Chase has that about it as well. It's the most indoor gamey Doctor Who. You know, you can imagine children every week The Chase was on playing each episode, and one week they'd play Dracula and one week they'd play Morton Dill. I would love to see if anyone has any reminiscences of cosplaying Morton Dill in 1965. Please let me know. And that's another reason I think The Chase is brilliant. It's just a child's eye view of Doctor Who, and it really goes for it. Reason.
You heard it here first. Cosplayers, break out your Morton Dill. I mean, there's been stranger cosplay. There's a couple of guys who've cosplayed as me from the Doctor Who cookbook documentary. I'm hoping this was my granddad's dressing gown. Perhaps that'll be next. Yeah. Well, I mean, I was kind of close there. Do I allow myself a point for? Because in saying about the universal horrors and the choice of them and what they achieve, I think honours are even with that one. It's a good job. The rules of this are entirely unclear, and there's no prize or penalty for anybody involved. I'll just arbitrarily say, he's 4 minutes closer. Oh no, that's dangerous. I think, as my commentary for this episode has proved, I'm rather tired. So that's going to be my end for now, and my end of The Chase, which I'm not going to have done in one day. So I will do episodes in 5 and 6 in a different outfit and a different climb. But I've got through Halloween in the House of Horrors with Doctor Who, and I hope you have too. Join me again for episode 5, when I will be joined on the sofa by somebody who looks nothing like me, but who I've badly dubbed on afterwards. It'll be the death of Toby Hadoke next time on Happy Times and Places. Cheerio.
I think you'll find. Of course, the Grey Lady shouts out. I say of course, I had to have it pointed out to me by patron Mark Trevor Owen. I'm going to say his name a lot because for some reason he hasn't been listed in the credits. Apologies to Mark. Mark Owen, Mark. And World Enough and Time, the podcast, which you can find on Twitter at World Enough Pod. Seek them out, and incidentally, best wishes to Alex at the moment from the World Enough and Time podcast. Both of them, and probably others, pointed out that the Grey Lady shouts unshriven. Unshriven means not having confessed and therefore remaining unabsolved of your sins, which is why she's a wandering spirit. Unshriven.
Okay, welcome back everybody to episode 5 of The Chase, which promises us, rather excitingly, the death of Doctor Who. So if you'd like to see that, press play or enter or whatever it is you'd like to press in 3, 2, 1, now. Oh, my sound is down. It's a different day from when you last joined me on this chase through time and space. I felt I was flagging a bit last episode, so I went to bed. I was flagging and a bit rough around the edges, but then so was the episode. So I think I'm going to allow myself that. But I've recharged my batteries, and now there are two of me. No, I'm intrigued to see this because he actually it doesn't look actually so bad from this distance. I'm accepting that. Oh, the death of Doctor Who. I mean, isn't that just the most exciting episode? Terry Nation knew what he was doing. It's very Perils of Paulini going, yeah, well, I'm going to set myself up something that looks inescapable. Doctor Who is going to, except, of course, the death. The Doctor Who that dies is the robot Doctor Who. Well, robots can't actually die. I know, but go with it and have fun. The fungoids, also known as the gubbage cones, and I think these creatures here, Jack Pitt, having played the cabin boy and a Venom grub, now gets to do this. I think one of them's Ken Tilson as well, who had been a Sensorite. And I think in the script, in the camera script, they're referred to as Mushroom Malone, are they? And Fungoid Fred and Toadstool Taffy. I think they all have amusing names that are not canon. It's a serious programme. That was just them larking about behind the scenes as actors and creative types do. But again, it's an attempt to, inhospitable alien environments. We don't really do that much anymore, which suggests to me we've got a little bit blasé about space travel, and for the sake of telling the story and meeting a new civilization or whatever. I don't think we get as carried away in the peculiarities of an alien environment. Things are alien, things are strange, and again, I sort of contend more so in the 60s than since, as we've sort of got used to the fact that television stories take us to other planets. We go, well, yeah, we do that. We don't need to bother about the mechanics of the other planet unless we have to wear a special hat to stop us exploding or whatever, just to play lip service to it. But it's not allowed to get in the way of the story, which has to be about more. I know there are exceptions. Don't write in. And it's very bold to do it on a TV budget in 1965. But this is already feeling more like what you expect of a Dalek story. The Daleks of... Yeah, I don't know why. I say that. I suppose because of the Dalek planet in the Daleks, and later you've got Kemble and everything, haven't you, in the Dalek master plan? Although the Dalek master plan is largely a slightly longer chase. And I think some of this, I think it was the fight certainly, was recorded earlier in the day because it's quite complicated, and because of, I think, the toll it would have taken on Hartnell. It's certainly a bold manoeuvre to go, we're going to have a fight between identical doctors and essentially do it in real time and with limited camera trickery. You've got to sort of take your hat off and go, okay, if that's what you're going to do. And again, do we say that is, hugely ambitious, or do we say that is a daft misunderstanding of the resources available? I don't know. I've got a grudging admiration for a time when you'd go, well, look, and it's interesting. I've interviewed Philip Hinchcliffe relatively recently, and I'd been watching him on that Lively Arts documentary where he basically said, we do these special effects and we're happy if 50% of them work. So that idea that you would embark upon something and you would go, but sometimes this won't work, but the audience will accept that because they accept they don't need it to be 100% convincing, because they know they're watching a fiction. And they know that the programme is trying to, if not depict something entirely accurately, to suggest something. And you have to do the rest of it. That is lost. That is a lost art now, that the audience do the work with you. The audience and there's a lot of glib television programs and glib television critics that I think have encouraged us and helped us to do that, where a television critic is somebody that doesn't love the medium but scores points by coming up with a bon mot at the expense of the program makers, even if it's got actually nothing to do with what was broadcast. And I think I've said before, you don't win. You don't win. If you get the enjoyment out of the show by being a bit superior to it, well, if that's how you want to enjoy yourself, well done. But if you don't want to go with the storytelling, that's up to you. Now, that's not to say that Doctor Who always gets it right. And also, if you are somebody that watches Doctor Who to laugh at its imperfections, but you enjoy it, that is absolutely fine. I think the reason I went down Vexatious Alley via Crossroad was just I was just reminded of the fact that the people that write about television for a living often seem to be rather disdainful of it, which I think is a bit rich. But Doctor Who fans, we enjoy it all in different ways, don't we? Some people will. Gavin Rymel, who I think I've mentioned, he enjoys getting to the nitty gritty of the different Dalek designs. Other people like making their own costumes and dressing up. I find it amusing that some quarters of Doctor Who fandom will have a go at. In fact, I think Kieran Hyman, who's a fan I met once at a convention, but I've seen him online. I think when I met him, he was dressed as Ian from The Chase, and I have got no desire to make a costume, to ape a costume, to discover whose costume was made out of what. But if somebody else does, and they have a great time doing it, and that's an expression of their creativity, I think that is great, and I think that is a wonderful thing that Doctor Who has done. And there is no, some corners I think of people, certainly of the internet inhabited by people of my age, are rather dismissive at best of cosplay, which is a thing I totally do not get or want to do. But I certainly don't think that I'm any better because I can identify a character actor at 30 paces or whatever else it is that that I get carried away by with and the sort of minutiae that vex me about Doctor Who. It's all fine. It's all good. Curious, these sets, aren't they? But that's an inventive shot because it's shooting through some sort of gossamer. That's really weird. And the way that that's been lit, it is that whatever's drawn on, whatever's painted on it, has a sort of slightly abstract quality. There's a nice high camera. Oh, I'm so sorry. I've gone back to shooting this in the normal fashion. We only had the high camera once to make up for my rather tired performance. I wonder if you put Gubbage Cone on your CV or Fungoid. I suppose what is fungoid what the plant is called, and Gubbage Cone is its Latin name, Gubbagicus conicus. And it sort of deflates. But they're not unlike the Varga plant, which is another piece of sort of lethal vegetation played by actors that appear in a future piece of Terry Nation. He liked his hostile environments. He liked his. I'm looking at the episode titles, lining this up. What Journey into Terror and The Death of Time. I mean, some of them just sort of mean nothing, do they? There's the famous Waking Ally in in Dalek Invasion of Earth. But a lot of the a lot of the titles in the Hartnell era are quite strange. There's story ones like The Rescue and The Escape, but I like it when they get a bit sort of destruction of time. The destruction of time. That at least that has a time destructor. Oh yeah, William Hartnell's playing the robot. Yes. Yeah. Yeah, I'd forgotten about this because I associate the robot with being Edmund Warwick, but and this is pretty much done in real time, isn't it? And he's in fact walking. And so now we have Edmund Warwick as your actual Doctor, dubbed on by Hartnell, and I'm loving these layers of, as I say, what is it, gossamer, sort of. Slightly see-through, slightly translucent set dressing or whatever. That's really quite clever. Slightly more effective than these drawn on. Although I actually quite like those because you can't tell if they're drawn on, if they're ridged or whatever. And now Hartnell, because we had the camera on Ian and Vicky, Hartnell swapped places with Edmund Warwick. It's almost like a tag team sort of thing. I think this is quite inventive and ingenious. And there's nothing, we've not had anything quite like this where, for our heroes, the Doctor, they're not sure if the Doctor is some sort of evil imposter, and he, by this point he's the main guy. I know early on in the series he was he was a character we weren't sure about, but this is quite disturbing. Yeah, the Daleks did make the death of Doctor Who. I like these titles, but they may as well be called the bad thing is going to happen, or but it's just I sometimes like the vagueness where Tony's going. I'm not even going to call it Empire State Building of Doom. I'll just call it bad thing will happen, or awful potentialities. Right. That's when Edmund Warwick actually speaks. That is they obviously decided that they could get away with one syllable. Oh yes, and he's attacking her with the cane. That's pretty grim. That, but I think in some of those shots, Edmund Warwick does not look too dissimilar to Hartnell. I was expecting much worse. I have to say, because I'm going into this very much in a positive frame of mind, I think my brain has sort of prepared me for the worst with some things, so they are consequently slightly better than I might think. So I might be being kinder, but I'm not being disingenuous. I think because I've prepared myself for the fall, the landing is slightly safer. Which one's the Doctor? And this is quite a call for Hartnell and this is clever with the angles, and I think this is pretty ingenious stuff for a television studio without recourse to special effects or post-production and all of that sort of thing. I think this is pretty smart. Okay, that's not William Hartnell. And he's a bit like a 10th Planet Cyberman in the fact that he's not really making much attempt for the mouth movements to match what he's actually saying, but you suspect because he shouldn't be shot all that much. And we don't, yeah, this is not a bad face-off. Although, yeah, I mean, studio fights are pretty clumsy at this time, and you know, there have been better fights than that in the history of Doctor Who, but there have also been worse. The Time Meddler. I've got a feeling I've looked at the camera and said the Time Meddler before when referring to a bad fight in Doctor Who, and I bet I wonder if I do it for this broadcast when I get to do the Time Meddler. I go, actually, this fight is rather good. It's suggestive of ancient Viking battles. Let's see, Oh, Dalek getting eaten by a garbage cone. But what about the Dalek that's inside the garbage? Oh no, he's survived. I'm sure I read there are some. I remember Doctor Who magazine saying that a BBC camera appears in the jungles of Mechanus, and I remember I had to look really hard for it. I probably won't spot it this time round. There is a BBC camera in the jungles of Mechanus, but I can't remember off the top of my head entirely when it is. But you can spend whole days searching for it if you so desire. And that can be quite fun if that's what you want to do. But Doctor Who's not unusual in that. If you watch quite a lot of old telly, you see things poking in to the corners. Oh, Ian is so sort of casually brave, isn't he? And the dynamic that they have, and the dynamic that the Doctor has with Barbara. I do hope they got married. I'm sure I asked William Russell at a commentary once, and I think I was expecting him to go. When I said, "Oh, did Ian and Barbara get married?" And I think, well, I don't know. I'm sure he shot me down. I can't remember. But I seem to recall getting shot down by William Russell quite kindly. But just I'd throw in something that I thought he'd just go with, and he didn't. But that might be just me being paranoid, because you're in a sense of high alert when you meet your heroes and are then doing a thing with them. And yeah. Anyway, he's a very charming and engaging fellow, and he's a lovely actor. And I was showing my partner something that his son Alfred Enoch was in, who's carrying on the tradition and being, and you can actually see, you can see that he's his son. There is a similarity in the look, and he's done some stuff in the States, and he's done some great stage and TV work here. What was that? Spying on the sleeping bodies of our heroes. What's this one called? Oh, The Death of Doctor Who. And the next one's called The Planet of Decision, which is again a really odd. I like those ones where they're a really, where you sort of go, I don't really know what that means, and you wouldn't sort of use that sequence of words today, I think. I mean, we know what the planet is, we know what decision means, and yes, I suppose a decision is made on the planet, but it's oh, look at that. That is a glorious model of the mechanoid city on stilts. That's a wonderful looking thing. It's, Ray Cusick and John Wood are the designers. And I think that is a fabulous looking thing, that mechanoid city. I remember that picture was in the early years book. That's where you got to get to, and this is where. And of course, when you first read about this story, this was the story that had the mechanoids in it, and it's only when you watch it that you go, they don't have them in it that much. Did I just spot? Okay, so they're the film Daleks, I think, in the background, the ones with slightly different coloured domes, and they've had their big bumpers removed. this is rather funky lounge music to herald the danger. It's almost like we've just walked into a funky bar. Yeah, that's rather a joyous musical choice. And the Doctor, of course, has gone to do the sheer suicide thing that Barbara's just been talking about. Which perhaps would have been a more dramatic moment had it not been a bing bang boo. I'm Doctor Who, and I'm not a dead Doctor Who, but I'm gonna boop boop a doo with the. So yeah, there's a couple of film Daleks in the back there. Look, I think I'm right in that. Again, Gavin Rymel's website is the repository for knowledge for all. Because this is the first one with the slats on the side as well, isn't it? Which were the Daleks I grew up with, and I was quite surprised when I saw the very early ones that they didn't have the slats on the midriff. They had the sort of horizontal things going round, which you can see the ones in the background have, because it's film Dalek. Oh, and by the film Dalek is the camera. I saw the camera. Yeah, that is the camera. How exciting. I hope that's made your day, that you could see a mistake. I've definitely not noticed these sort of see-through blankets or whatever they are that sort of make up the set. I think that's... I like those a lot. Oh, the Doctor's pretending to be the robot. Oh. Oh, gosh, he seems quite shaken by that. And hearing the Doctor, the Dalek shooting off screen, there was a suggestion there that the Doctor might have bought it. That was oh, that's brilliant. I'd forgotten that the wall sort of collapsed. The drama's really heightened in the last 3 minutes or so of this episode. You got no choice. Yeah, that's great. It's sort of do we stay in the frying pan or do we jump into the fire? It's a planet of decision. Well, they've just made the decision. Surely it's not called the planet of the decision because of that decision, because they've made the decision. The planet that was decided upon, where a decision has just taken place. Robot Doctor Who. Mechanoid voice. Mechanoid is spelt wrong, isn't it? A fight arranged by Peter Diamond. Oh, okay. Yeah, Mechanoid is spelt wrong on the credits for this episode, which I sort of like. That will I will mention some other nomenclature-based hijinks, Mechanoid style, in the next episode. But I have to choose my favourite. Flight Through Eternity. Yeah, see, that doesn't mean anything. Journey into Terror. That doesn't mean anything. I've got the episode titles up. The Death of Time. They're just sort of like... He could have called it Dry Planet of the Sad Fish People, or Empire State Building of Doom, or Haunted House of Terror. But instead it's just sort of, I'll be vague, because I'll write the title and then I'll write the episode, and then I won't bother to go back and change the title. Yeah, I think so. Right. Oh, what have I got to choose? Well, I just think the sheer balls of going, because I remember reading the title, The Death of Doctor Who, in a Doctor Who quiz book. I think it said match these episode titles with their stories. I thought, well, The Death of Doctor Who. And then when I read about the chase and read about the fact there was a robot Doctor Who, I thought, I bet that's what it is, that it's not Doctor Who, it's the robot Doctor Who. Again, if you're a kid and you work that out, you feel really, really clever, because they're basically saying, you're going to watch an episode now that Doctor Who dies, and at some point in that episode, the kids watching will go, oh, no, I know, they mean the robot. Phew, Doctor Who's not going to die. And I think that's writing very well. That's writing very cleverly for your audience. And it also leads to the production team having to be very, very inventive, not always succeeding. But some of the ways that they depicted the robot, and some of the hard work that William Hartnell put in, and some of the clever use of the cameras, led to some great invention and some great sleights of hand and sleights of performance in order to pull off that thing that was, frankly, impossible under the circumstances in which they made television in those days, unless they'd had a film sequence that they could, I'm surprised they didn't even try to sort of go, well, let's do that bit on film. But they didn't. They did it in the studio. The mad bastards. That's what I like about it. And that's, it probably would disappointed and embarrassed me 20 years ago. And I'm not a worse person for actually going, I think that's great and really entertaining. My life is better now that I think that is fine. As I edge ever closer towards death, I'm more accepting of slightly slipshod television. And if there's not a lesson in that, I don't know. Oh dear. Right. So what does Darrell like? He's an enthusiastic fellow, isn't he? I've never met him. And he's put real effort into this, and I'm very grateful.
Reason number 5. I'm going to be on the other hand next. Hope there's not too many of these. I don't want to take my socks off. Reason number 5 is the mechanoids. Now, a lot of the 60s monsters, as much as we love them, are quite ugly. They're generally lumps with eyes on stalks, or, fiberglass with eyes. But the mechanoids are beautiful. They are basically just a geodesic sphere. I don't have one with me, so that you're going to imagine a mechanoid. Sorry, I don't know what this is. Like a turtle. But the mechanoids are beautiful, and they're amazing, and they never got used again, and they should be brought back. They could still be brought back. If they can bring back the macra, they can bring back the mechanoids. Do something interesting with them. Have them open up. What's inside? Bring back the mechanoids. They are gorgeous. So, reason number...
we'll have to have reason number 6 at the next episode. And I'm slightly irritated by that because I nearly chose the mechanoid because that's a great entrance, especially with the door collapses or whatever it did there. That was a really tense last few minutes of that episode. That was very well done. Funky lounge music aside. Ba-doo, ba-doo, ba-doo. It wasn't that. That's the opening music, but it was still, yeah. The mechanoid I liked, but I sort of had in the back of my head to go, well, I'll choose the mechanoids next week because that's the mechanoid episode. And I can't do that now because Darrell has chosen the mechanoids. So I'm going to have to choose something else. So I thought I'd made my choice, but it does mean that next week I'm going to have to, well, I'm going to be on a planet of decision. Well, never mind the dead planet, or the mysterious planet, or the devil's planet. We're on a planet, and we've got a decision to make, and that's whether to watch episode 6 of The Chase. And I've decided, and the answer is yes. And so I hope you've decided too, because I'm going to press play in 3, 2, 1, now. So I pressed play, I pressed enter, because I was on... episode selection. So it could have called it Planet of the Garbage Cones or Planet of the Intelligent Hexagonal Robots, but Planet of the Mechanoids. Nope, it's Planet of Decision. Well, I suppose. I was thinking the other day, if my other half says to me, look, we've got 2 things to buy. We've got, there's this hose that has these attachments, but it's £5 more expensive than this hose, which has got this lovely retracting thing, but it doesn't have the attachments. And the attachments that go with that, and I just I don't want to make the decision. You make the decision. And I always in shops when there was a choice between different toys, I'd feel sorry for the ones I didn't choose. I hated making that decision. So maybe Terry Nation is a bit like maybe deciding is actually more terrifying to Terry Nation than robots in inhospitable environments. And actually having mocked it last week, I'm actually coming around to because I'm terrible at making decisions, and I as often as I can pass on the responsibility to other people. But I know that there's going to be more than deciding going on. I remember one of the few Doctor Who magazines. I'm just going to check that camera because it made a noise. Yeah, it did stop. How interesting. That has happened once before. But let's not worry about that. I remember there was a Doctor Who magazine, one of the... I did, because I didn't subscribe when I was younger, because I didn't have the money, but we got the odd one, or I got given one. And I remember one of the ones I had a letter in the letters page where somebody had sent in a picture of the mechanoid toy. And it was revealed that was very rare, and they were lucky to have it, and blah blah blah. And it looked like an absolute thing of beauty. And I do think the mechanoids are a lovely design. They're really pleasing. I mean, they're massive. They're like tanks, but they're not, because they have slightly more personality than a tank. And of course, this is as Darrell, who has chosen them, his favourite thing for episode 5, which means I can't make the decision on this planet that the mechanoids are my favourite thing about it. And presumably the mechanoid toy would have looked not unlike that. You see, and I suppose, I wonder how long that hung around in Ray Cusick's drawer for, that tiny little mechanoid. And of course we can't have tiny little Doctor and Vicky and Ian and Barbara, so we assume they're behind a pillar or something. But they're funny things, and I'm not sure I anticipated how they would talk, but certainly I'm not sure I expected this slightly sort of weird communication thing that they have, which makes them actually slightly cute, which I hadn't expected. I don't know what I'd expected, but certainly what I got when I first saw them in action and in conversation was not what I'd expected when I'd seen those toys and the pictures of the mechanoids. But actually the way they move and the size they are is pretty impressive. And there's a record, there's a single that I think has episode 6 of The Chase on it and is narrated by David Graham, that I've heard a couple of times, that a friend got hold of. And I'm sure, having had their name spelt wrong in the credits of episode 5, I think they're referred to as Mechons in that, in the narration of that. I don't think I'm wrong in that. And Mechons was the original name of the mechanoids before they got rechristened Mechanoids. I note that simply because it might be of interest. Well, I suppose it's the same reason I say anything in these chitter chats that I do. But yeah. And a bit of beard growth there for Peter Purvis, who's changed a bit in the 3 weeks since he was Morton Dill, and because when you read about these sorts of stories, he's got a polo neck. This really is the polo neck story, isn't it? They've really gone for it as a costuming motif. So when one read about this story as a kid, it features the mechanoids, it features the debut of Stephen Taylor. You sort of naturally assumed that those things would be in it earlier than the last episode. And isn't it because Dodo also arrives in the last episode of the story that she is introduced in? And Katerina, although I don't really count Katerina as a companion for reasons we'll go into in great detail when somebody is sensible enough to choose the Mythmakers or the Dalek Master Plan. I wouldn't stop talking for you. You could do one of these conches then, Stephen Taylor. You need a bit of verbal diarrhea. Sorry, you've tuned in. You've only got yourselves to blame. He's very naturalistic. So that was what surprised me as a kid, because when I was younger, Peter Purves was a Blue Peter presenter. I had no idea that he'd been in Doctor Who until I got the Doctor Who 20th anniversary Radio Times special, and there's a picture of him in the Celestial Toymaker. Some glorious colour pictures of the Celestial Toymaker, and I'm sure that's Peter Purves. And it was the revelation that Peter Purves was a Doctor Who companion, which was a real surprise. It's... it'd be like, finding out that, I don't know, Terry Nutkins was in Blake 7 or some such. Then when I started watching the episodes that he's in, it was also a surprise that Peter Purves, because he did crufts, didn't he? And the darts, he was a sort of he sort of metamorphosed into a sports/dog presenter. That he's a really good actor. He's very naturalistic. He's got some nice attitude. Stephen's not as grumpy as he was written up in some of the early Doctor Who literature. He is quite he's quite confrontational in this, I suppose, but he was sort of written up as temperamental astronaut Stephen Taylor, and he's not. He's actually becomes the sort of hero when Hartnell's sidelined in the third season, when John Wiles, I think rather pettily, seems to send out an edict saying, give William Hartnell increasingly less to do, and Stephen is the hero of the massacre. He has the bulk of the action in Dalek's master plan, and Purvis is more than capable. Another Dalek appendage! I love her! Now, this is the Dalek spinny plate thin turd appendage. It looks less like a turd when it's not spinning round. I like that. I'd forgotten about that. And there we've got the compassy thing from earlier. I think I would happily see new Dalek appendages every week, and this week is a classic for them. I'd totally forgotten about this, whatever this one is, the inverted hat, the plate of the plate of stringy turd, whatever it is. Barbara, you tell the mechanoid to get lost. There is something a bit sort of human zoo-y, isn't there? I remember an episode of The Twilight Zone, which I haven't seen much of, and it was one I just stayed up late to watch as a kid, and where it was a guy, is he sort of befriended by aliens, and he's an astronaut, and then it turns out he's just he's an exhibit in a museum or a zoo or something. And there was something about, the slats there that look like the bars of a cage, and it makes them kind of sort of exhibits for the sort of voyeurism of these rather strange staccato robot things, and that's great, isn't it? The thing in Stephen's cell, it's like for a kid, it's like a fun climbing frame. But yes, I going back to the Dalek appendages, I would. I think if I'd been around in the 60s and was trying to find new things to do with the Daleks, I'd definitely give them, a saw or a camera or a whisk. And this is okay. So this is on the roof here. I get a feeling of height because he's shooting it quite low. Oh, that's God, Ian, blimey. I buy that from the camera work and the acting, that we're pretty high up with what looks like giant reels of cotton. Oh, and this is, of course, I have to build up to this because it's the end of Ian and Barbara, isn't it? Who, lest we forget, have been with us since there is much a part of Doctor Who as the Doctor. They've been in it as long as him. In fact, we got to know them really before we got to know him because he was a mystery. We're quite comfortable with him now, and that's more comfortable than that camera was. Wow. but William Russell has done such a good job of being the pragmatic hero. You know, he's not boring. He has a sense of fun about him. He's he's as cool as a school teacher was allowed to be in the 1960s, I'm sure. And he's very good at keeping the situation straightforwardly dramatic. And Jacqueline Hill is just fabulous as Barbara, and often bears the brunt of having the worst, most panicky material to deliver, but there's so much more to her than that. She's a cracking actress. And I had the pleasure of meeting her daughter, who looks just like her. You can totally see. And it turned out I was already Facebook friends with her. I don't know why. But I went and interviewed her, Jacqueline Hill's husband, Alvin Rakoff, about something else. And he very kindly invited me to the home that they lived in when she was in Doctor Who. He still lives in the same place. What a beautiful home it is. And yes, and their daughter was there, and it was, and I didn't say, oh, I'm a Doctor Who fan or anything, because I was being polite and all sorts. But anyway, that was quite an amazing experience. I love what Maureen O'Brien does on the top here to suggest height. She's doing that sort of I'm slightly giddy and slightly nuts because I'm high up, and we've all done that. I mean, I've been on a bridge holding a baby, and you have that sort of weird fascination with going, oh, what if I drop this baby now? Which and I think that's your mind saying to you, whatever you do, don't drop the baby. But that sort of strange, sort of perverse panic thing, stroke exhilaration, stroke is really nicely done there. I think she's a really interesting actress, Maureen O'Brien, and she sometimes makes choices that look a bit odd, but that's because of the nature of the filming rather than any shortcoming of the performance. Although I think Barbara's about to get garroted. But I think a lot of her quite sophisticated choices, Maureen O'Brien, would work better when you've got slightly less sort of primitive shooting methods. So she's slightly ahead of her time. But what I had totally forgotten that they almost decapitate Barbara Wright, and now Ian's trying not to pull her trousers down. What an undignified moment for Jacqueline Hill, who I'd just been eulogising moments before. She nearly gets her head chopped off and then nearly gets her trousers pulled down. Crikey, that went all out for ungainly realism. I think you'd have done that again. Anyway, and now we're going into so that was a model. But now we go into the film sequence, which they could have saved a little bit of leftover for to do the fight with the robot Doctor Who. But I remember reading in Doctor Who: A Celebration, the final sequence, the battle between the Daleks and the Mechanoids. Richard Martin, who was a gifted film director, excelled here, and Richard Martin really does go to town when he's on film, and this is obviously a showpiece sequence. Oh, look at that! I love the flamethrowers, but of course by this time the Mechanoids, I think, have been deemed too ungainly to ever appear in Doctor Who again, which is a shame, because this is glorious stuff, isn't it? And there's inlays and there's smoke and there's explosions, and God, they look great surrounding the Dalek. They sort of dwarf the Dalek, which is marvellous. Oh, and look at the flames, and that was a bit of animation there, wasn't there? A bit of whatever that flash is. There's all sorts of techniques going on here to sort of go. You're at the end of, come on, we've had Abraham Lincoln and Dracula and Frankenstein and the Mary Celeste, etc., etc. And now this is the end of this epic, chase through time and space. We've got a sense of occasion about this, and that was pretty. That's the sort of stuff that as a kid you'd be, reimagining and drawing pictures of and all sorts of things. And the smoke's there to suggest, come on, we got to get out of here because, we're in a dangerous spot and things are getting worse because all hell's breaking loose. Good action, well done, William Russell. I'd forgotten you. That's actually quite a way down you've gone there, and there's actually bits of flame falling down. Then I'm not sure they were entirely necessary. All of this smoke and these explosions, that's actually just a bit of stock footage, isn't it, with the model superimposed over it? But I totally buy that. That works for me. It's slightly abstract, but I like it. It works. Real sense of scale going on there. Okay, we're doing this. So the Daleks have been destroyed by the mechanoids. And is Ian's checking out the DARDIS. It's never referred to as the... Now, Ian, you've been a bit glib. It's like, I'm nearly out of here. It's not referred to as a DARDIS on screen. So it's just the Dalek time machine, and the Daleks have all been blown up. And there's a sort of end of term feel, but I have a really heavy heart because I remember when I watched this as part of Running Through Corridors that I did with Rob Shearman, which was the last time I saw this. It was at the end of watching all of William Russell and Jacqueline Hill's episodes in order, and they're a really important part of Doctor Who. And the fact that they stayed beyond that first year, beyond Susan's departure, which you'd think would be the one that the Doctor really couldn't cope with because she was his granddaughter, and it weathered that storm. But it sort of solidified their place as really vital parts of Doctor Who. Yes, hello, Stephen. I mean, bad-tempered maybe, but stupid enough to go back for a toy panda. Yeah, you swear at that's brilliant. I'd forgotten he did that. He's just looked at his panda as if to say, "Oh, you made me go back for you stupid stuffed git." And this is because Hartnell. Oh, I want to sit in a pub and drink a. Oh. And this is interesting, isn't it? Because it recaptures that original butting of heads that this relationship was all about. But this is so sad because we know it's actually because they're all actually upset at the prospect. And when we're upset and we don't want to confront our emotions, we say things we perhaps don't mean, and we shout at people that we care about. So this is all very real. And I know that Jacqueline Hill comes back because she's in Meglos, but this is the last time we see Ian and Barbara, and the show has gone on for another 50 odd years without them, but Ian, but they're still out there somewhere. In London, 1965. Hartnell's really good in this, and it proves the importance of Vicky's character because she's the young innocent one, but actually is the wisest one in this situation, and she uses that to make the Doctor do the right thing, and he knows really. The dynamic here between everyone is excellent. And I find it desperately sad because I care about the people that are in Doctor Who, the actors and the characters, because they're a big part of my life. and this is a big one because they're leaving Hartnell as the last remaining original cast member, and you sort of know as well what it will have done to him. Got a 50-50 chance. That's not much of a goodbye, is it? Yeah, I'll send you, but you might die. And we don't actually. That's the last time we see them together, isn't it? We don't see them say goodbye, which I think is probably more than I could bear. And actually, what is unsaid is probably more effective. Oh, I find this heartbreaking. I really do. I'm a silly old fusspot. I think that's what he's about to call him, isn't he? Oh God, yeah. And actually, they don't say anything. And now here we are on film, and they've landed in a shed, so we don't have to see the Dalek spaceship. 1965. So you've actually been gone as long as you. It was interesting that they decided to return them to sort of now, as it were, when the episode is being shown. And of course, they then said let's return you to when you disappeared. So they'll have lots of explaining to do. I don't know how they're going to explain where they've been for 2 years and what happened to one of their school pupils, but they'll wonder where he is. It was fun, and you were great. And this is weird. You don't have this. I remember there's an episode of Doomwatch where a lot of it is done by sort of still photographs. Which, I mean, is just a stylistic thing that I say you wouldn't do now, but I'm sure the examples where perhaps you have that's great. They see the police box. But I wonder why they did it as photos. But it's very sweet. And I think some of this was directed by Douglas Camfield, wasn't it? I don't know why I think that, but I think it was because I think he cast Derek Ware as the bus conductor, who is I think not credited in this, is it? But it's Derek who was a stuntman, rather trained actor, but stuntman. Founded Havoc, great servant to Doctor Who. He'd been in Caveman Double in the very first story, doubling Cal or Zar. They made it. Oh, and you can see it on the Space Time Telegraph. So that's nice that it brings that back into, having had it as a bit of padding for the first episode. God, he's so good. Yeah, I feel it. Oh, I'm really upset. Silly old fusspots. That's really nicely done. We're off. I think that's really nicely done. And I love William Russell and Jacqueline Hill. I thank them for being my friends in Doctor Who. And I'm really sad to see them go. And I'm not ashamed of that. And there was no artifice in that at all. That's I care about the people in Doctor Who because they've been a big part of my life. And of course, I can see Ian and Barbara whenever I want, but there is something about the fact that this is the end of their journey, and we don't need anything as cheap as a cliffhanger into the next story. I think that would undermine the import of what has just happened, which is we've just lost, our last. Mechanoid spelt correctly this time. Our last connection with bar the Doctor with Doctor Who when it started. I love that. I do find that I think they got a lot of companions get bad, hurried send-offs or send-offs that are a victim of circumstance. I think that's perfect. I think that's perfect. And I think they're perfect. And I'm very sad that Jacqueline Hill died so comparatively young. She's so good. They're both really good. I think they're both really good. And I love those characters because they just pitch it. They just pitch it right. Okay. Well, obviously my favourite thing of episode 6 is the perfectly handled departure of Ian and Barbara. And my favourite thing overall is a slightly trickier, especially as Darrell has, I think, already chosen my what I take away mostly from this is the sort of chutzpah of going, right, this is a shopping list of really exciting comic book stuff if you're a 10-year-old child in 1965. Well, I think I can say, having chosen, I think that film sequence of the Daleks fighting the mechanoids, is a step above the rest of the production. It's where they've clearly thrown a lot of money and time, and is a showpiece moment that rewards 6 weeks of the odd planets of derision. So yeah, I'll take the film sequence of the Daleks versus the mechanoids. So they're both things from episode 6, although one of them is a bonus thing. It's the freshest in my mind. And I have to take the departure of Ian and Barbara, which they judge very well, but also that's an acknowledgement for not just the fact that they departed, but of their huge contribution to the previous, however many episodes of Doctor Who they were in. What has Darrell chosen?
So, reason number 6. I can count. It's Ian and Barbara's leaving scene now. Ian and Barbara's leaving scene is really unusual in 60s Doctor Who, as people point to things like Survival as pointing the way to the new series in the Russell T Davies era, but that scene at the end of the chase with Ian and Barbara leaving is so much like the Rose world in the first couple of new series runs. It really feels like the present day. I know they tried it a few times in Doctor Who, present day things, even like the War Machines and a few times in the Colour era, but nothing like how real that London feels. And then you get the photo montage, and there's something genuinely emotional and genuinely heartfelt about those last 2 minutes of the chase. And it really caps off this mad 6 episodes of utter chaos with this really heart-rending scene. And you're saying goodbye to, there's only one regular remaining after this story. It's only the Doctor. All the companions have gone now. Susan's left. Ian and Barbara have left. And it's really is that moment. You can see it echoed at the end of The Green Death and Hand of Fear. But that scene is really nice and kind of beyond compare. And it's really nice we have that. And even if you can't stand anything that goes on in the chase and you think it's a mess, that scene's got to touch you somewhere. And if it doesn't, you're one of these. Reason number 7. Reason number 7 is the Beatles bit in episode 1. Now, I'm fickle, but the fact is, even if you hate the chase, it is the only place to see the Beatles on Top of the Pops. Now, if you were a not-we, thinking about what's the most 1960s piece of footage you could possibly find, you go, maybe a clip of the Beatles on Top of the Pops. But you can't see it except in the chase. All the Beatles appearances on Top of the Pops are lost, except the clip that is in the chase. And it doesn't turn up in any Beatles documentaries or anything else. That bit of the Beatles singing Ticket to Ride on Top of the Pops in the chase is an exclusive, except in America. And that is the only place you can see it. So, archivally, for people that hate Doctor Who and love the Beatles, the chase is the one story they would rescue from a burning building. And that's got to have something going for it. I don't know why there would be a burning building with all the Doctor Who stories in and someone only gets one go, but that's the rules of this fictional situation. And maybe the chase is what I'd rescue as well. So, Beatle fans, that is another reason why the chase is perfect and we should treasure it forever. Honestly. Rock on!
Well, thank you to Darrell for going to such an effort to put together such an entertaining video, but also that's really interesting because I think I mentioned at some point, yes, the Empire State Building's probably present day, and then we have the War Machines and and then we have Planet of Giants, which are the things in the present day before the War Machines, which generally people say is the first present day story. Totally discounted, of course, the fact that Ian and Barbara's return is the present day. That's the whole point of it, is that they, the 2 years that we spend with them, they actually do spend away in their own journey. They have aged as much as they would have done had they stayed on Earth. And that is contemporary London. And then I didn't know that about the Beatles and the Top of the Pops thing, because I'm not a music aficionado at all, that is an archival treat, and that's the only Beatles on Top of the Pops. That's extraordinary. Well done, Doctor. I hope somewhere in the Beatles archive are the only copies of the Daleks Master Plan episodes that are missing. Now, Darrell has he sent me a third file. He broke his response files up into 2 sets of 3 episodes, but he says he sent me a third one. I have no idea what this is. Every guest has responded to my request in their own way, which has been an unexpected pleasure, an unexpected bonus of this. So what Darrell is gonna top this off with, I've got no idea. So let's have a look.
So, thank you for listening to my choices. I hope you don't judge me too harshly for my choice of story. I've got a few things on the boil. Can't talk about them all, but there is an audio drama called The Barren Author, Barren Author, which stars Richard O'Brien and Sophie Aldred, and unbelievably, in one episode, me. And that's available as a download. It should be available by the time this goes out. Search for The Barren Author. It's from Spiteful Puppet. Search for them, you'll find it. Hopefully some other stuff to announce soon. But until then, thank you for listening, and goodbye. Oh, and one more thing. I said before that I love The Chase because it's a bit like a light entertainment show. And I do. But how else do you finish a light entertainment show? With a song.
They're bringing Daleks in by the lorry. They caused them marry Celeste, but they're sorry. They're shooting day for night in a quarry that's called Aridians. The latest robots have been putting some fat on, whilst Peter Purvis put an amusing hat on. Barbara and Ian went and passed down the baton. So sad to be rid of yous. I just wanted you to know that of all the stories I could have had, I paid me money and took the chase. I know that casters can't glide over rubble. That haunted house is frankly asking for trouble. And I'll admit that Billy's uncanny double could be more uncannier. But stuff your cities of deaths and your kinders, and chop Inferno and blink up for tinders. I wanna float around just like burnt cinders in Viva Hispania. Cause you know we all say, let's all go back to 1965. We'll feed the pigeons and hope it never ends. Because what's 2 years among friends when he sends us back home? Let's all go back to 1965. We never ever want to go back inside. All we can say is, well, thanks for the ride.
Full of actual sketches, like review sketches. There's, the Shakespeare one, and the things they go to later on, like the like this. The hand sketch.
Oh, do you know what? I'm very touched by that as well, because he's done that for this. Somebody I don't know, Never met. And in fact, I only started following him on Twitter during lockdown because he kept putting up these songs and people retweeting them of him singing, doing famous singers singing, or TV themes done in the style of famous singers. And he tickled me and I thought he was brilliant, so I started following him. And then he started following me for some reason. I don't know why. Something had happened that sort of meant I hit his radar. And so I just sent him a thing. He was obviously a Doctor Who fan and said, would you do this? And he's sort of gone above and beyond the Call of Duty. He's done a song with coloured pictures and everything. And isn't that a testament to what we do best as Doctor Who fans is that it inspires us creatively in different ways. And I'm constantly amazed at how clever and inventive and joyous people can be, and that's a tonic, and that's and that plays against sometimes at the end of a day when you're flicking through social media and it just seems that everybody's being a bit of a git to each other. Actually, we fixate upon the half emptiness of the glass because we're almost trained to expect that. I adored the way that Darrell, as I say, kindness of strangers, responded to a request from somebody he's never met with such invention and such wit. Check out his Twitter feed, which has those things that first drew him to my attention. I'll put his Twitter feed on the screen. And with real thanks to Darrell for going above and beyond the Call of Duty for this. I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. I've got to be honest with you, I've never liked The Chase. I tried to be nice about it through running through corridors, but actually, to write a couple of paragraphs per episode is pretty easy to do. 150 to 200 words per episode, you can kind of get away with it. I've had to talk for 2.5 hours. I hope at least some of it's been entertaining. But I've gone into this to have somebody inspire a positive vibe about anything. I thought everybody would be choosing Blink and Genesis of the Daleks. People are going, Time Flight, The Chase. But I found this really invigorating to go to something I've been furious with in the past. I used to get so cross with it. I gleefully score it 2 out of 10. I sort of, as I say, through the prism of Darrell's celebration of it and the way that he couches it in a different way to how I would have done as the angry teenager who first saw it. And I had a riot with that. It's not always great, but it's always... And I think Terry Nation can be a bit glib sometimes, and I think he can also be a bit... it's almost like he doesn't care that he's giving them things that they can't pull off because that's way down the line from him. But nonetheless, it makes for this sort of heady mishmash that is quite unlike anything. You wouldn't do it now. You wouldn't get away with it now. Of pitching something so tonally all over the place, and also often so beyond the bounds of what is possible to do with the resources that you have. And they just go, we could do it anyway. So if nothing else, thank you for being with me as I learn to stop worrying and love the chase. I'll see you next time.
Thank you so much for listening to Happy Times and Places with me, Toby Hadoke, and my special guest, Darrell MacLaine, who can be found on Twitter at MacLockdown. I'd also like to thank this episode's featured patrons, who are Ruben Herfindahl, Rob Leonard, Stephen Moffat, not that one, Richard Straw, Jenny at Bluebox99, Paul Cook, Rob Dawson, John Deere, Chris Dunford-Kelk, Siobhan Galichon, Ian Key, Joe Llewellyn, Darren Mackay, Jeff Kaplan, Andy Kitching, Hendrik Korzeniowski, Nate Lynch, Sean McAllister, Pip Madeley, Nick Mellish, Russell Parker, Ken Patterson, Thomas Payne, Quarridors, Gavin Rymill, Tom Selinsky, Jim Sankster, Paul Shields, Richard Smith, David Spencer, Dave Stevens, Adam Stone, Paul Taylor Greaves, Sidney Trote, John Turner, Gary Wales and Alistair Wallace. The music for this podcast is by Dave Gates. If you would like to financially support these podcasts, you can do so by becoming a Patreon. You get advanced and exclusive material at patreon.com/Toby Hadoke, or you can do a one-off payment at kofi.com/Toby Hadoke. And if you can't do either of those things, and I understand in these trying times that might not be possible, you are nonetheless still welcome. Please rate 5 stars if you can, and review these at all your podcast outlets, and spread the word. Thank you so much. More information at www.tobyhadoke.com, and check out my weekly comedy show Excess Malarkey at twitch.tv/Excess Malarkey. That's the letter X, the letter S, and then Malarkey. Every week there are 4 international stand-up comedians doing their bit, and probably a bit more swearing and somewhat less Doctor Who than this podcast, but it is nonetheless still very entertaining and good value.